Chapter 697. That's great. After successfully entering Sage Mode, Naruto waved his fist with all his might. At this time, his entire temperament was completely different. His originally pure blue eyes had turned into snake-like vertical pupils, and slight scales had appeared on his face. Do it! Feeling that Naruto had entered Sage Mode, above his head, Xianya immediately roared. Seeing Xianya's huge body twisting, Naruto hurriedly said, Xianya, other than those 4 bad guys, everyone else here are your companions. You must not hurt them. So troublesome. Although Xianya was grumbling, his movements were much slower. Seeing the huge monster in front of them suddenly moving and getting into an attack posture, Asuma and the others suddenly felt a chill in their hearts, hesitating whether to reveal their true identities. At this moment, Xianya's thick and powerful tail suddenly whipped, sweeping towards Asuma and the others. Boom, 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 with a series of rumbling sounds. All the trees along the way were uprooted by this blow. Gravel, sawdust, and air waves mixed together, like a storm covering the entire battlefield. Asuma and the others' attention was all on the head of the giant snake. They did not expect the giant snake to be so cunning. The previous arched body into an attack posture turned out to be a cover for the tail attack. Facing this sudden, fierce tail attack, Asuma and the others could not avoid it all. They could only barely raise their hands to protect their vital parts. Boom! The storm instantly swept through the entire battlefield. As jonins, Asuma and the others were as small as insects in this storm and were fiercely thrown out. Bang! After his body slammed into a big tree, Asuma, who coughed out a mouthful of blood, managed to stabilize his body. Then he subconsciously looked at the messy battlefield and was suddenly shocked. Oh no, the children. As a jonin, he was already in such a sorry state in the storm. Needless to say, those children who were unconscious or subdued would definitely be severely injured if they were not dead after being hit by this attack. Red, Gale, and Shien barely managed to stabilize themselves. They ignored their injuries and looked at the dust-filled battlefield worriedly. They didn't expect the giant snake to be so cunning. It didn't even give them a chance to explain, let alone save the children. Soon, the smoke and dust dispersed. Asuma, Red, and the others hurriedly looked over, only to discover that on the messy battlefield, there was not a single person to be seen. The instructors and students who were lying all over the ground had all disappeared without a trace. Where is he? Asuma furrowed his brows. Could it be that they were all blown away by the storm just now? As Gale spoke, he scanned his surroundings. However, he did not find any instructors or students in the messy forest. Swish, Naruto descended from the sky and pressed his hand on the ground. Rumble. In an instant, accompanied by a tremor on the ground, the soil and stones seemed to have a life of their own, lifting the instructors and students from the ground and sending them back to the ground. It turned out that when Xianya launched his tail attack, just now, Naruto had already activated the immortal art, inorganic reincarnation, temporarily giving life to the ground, allowing the ground to wrap all his companions who were lying on the ground. Not only did it protect his companions from being accidentally injured by Xianya's tail attack, but it also cleverly separated his companions from Asuma and the others who were disguised as Akatsuki. Looking at the whole ground that seemed to have a life of its own, wriggling and lifting the instructors and students out of the ground, Asuma suddenly asked with a puzzled look, What ninjutsu is this? Although he was not as knowledgeable as his father, the 3 Generations Naruto, but under the influence of the 3 Generations Naruto, who was known as the Doctor of Ninjutsu, he could almost recognize most of the conventional ninjutsu in the ninja world at a glance. However, the scene in front of him made him search his mind for nothing. Kurenai shook her head. All the Earth-released ninjutsu that she knew did not match the scene in front of her. Sasuke, who was wrapped in the soil, first looked around with a blank face. Then his eyes focused on the back of Naruto, who was standing in front of him. Ming! Naruto? He called out uncertainly. Naruto did not look back. He just raised his right hand that gave a thumbs up, leaving his back to Sasuke, "Sasuke, don't worry. I will definitely protect you." At this time, Exanya said in a muffled voice, "Hey, Naruto, your companions are safe. We can go all out now." "Yes," Naruto responded with great momentum. Looking at Naruto, who was communicating with the giant snake on an equal footing, Sasuke opened his mouth, but did not know what to say. A sour feeling surged uncontrollably in his heart. Ningxi, who came back to his senses, also looked at the giant snake with a face full of horror, a bitter expression on his face. As a self-proclaimed genius, his only opponent was Sasuke, and he had never put Naruto, who was at the bottom of the ranking, in his eyes. But in a desperate situation, he found that whether it was himself or Sasuke, they were all vulnerable, and it was Naruto, who was at the bottom of the ranking, who had become the big hero who saved everyone. In the distance, seeing Naruto and the giant snake cooperate well, Asuma curled his lips. So the giant snake's attack just now was just to separate us from the trainees? Red, Gale, and Shien also realized that the giant snake in front of them did not lose control and go on a rampage, but was very loyal to Naruto. After discovering this, the few of them were not in a hurry to reveal their identities. As Jounin, as long as the trainees' safety was not threatened, they had the intention to test Naruto's limits. After all, the reason why Hyojin arranged this actual combat exercise was to see the trainees' performance in desperate situations, as well as their potential. Whoosh! At this time, Exanya spat a mouthful of gray mud at Asuma and the others. Poochie, Poochie, when the mud splashed on the trees, it immediately made a sound of corrosion. At the same time, the trees that came into contact with it were quickly petrified, turning into lifeless rocks. "Everyone be careful." Seeing this, Asuma dodged and warned the others. Although he did not know what the mud Exanya spat out was, his intuition told him that once the mud touched a body, it would be over. Swoosh! Suddenly, a figure pounced in front of Asuma. Little Devil. After discovering that it was Naruto, the corner of Asuma's mouth twitched, and he swung his fist to meet it. As a Jounin, his honor did not allow him to run away from the little devil without fighting, not to mention that he was good at physical skills. Bang! The two fists collided, and there was a low, muffled sound that seemed to strike directly at the soul. Then, under everyone's surprised gaze, the tall Asuma was sent flying by Naruto's punch. First update. Chapter 698. Boom! Boom! Boom, accompanied by a loud noise. Asuma, who was sent flying, knocked down 3 or 4 towering trees in a row, barely stopped his body, and fell to the ground in a cloud of smoke. Puff! As soon as he landed, he knelt down and spat out a mouthful of blood. In an instant, the red blood dripped along the edge of the gray mask on his face, and in just a moment, a large pool of blood dripped on the ground in front of him. How could this be? Not far away. Red was shocked. As a Jonin, Asuma was sent flying by Naruto. Sasuke and Ningxi, who were still lying on the ground, looked at each other after seeing this scene. Through the previous fight, the strength of Asuma, who was disguised as a member of the Akatsuki organization, was clear to both of them. In terms of physical skills, he is definitely a Jonin, a strong person who can defeat them in an instant. But such a strong person actually lost to Naruto in physical skills. Not long ago, Naruto was ranked last in the ninja school's physical skills assessment and was laughed at by all the students for a whole month. There's no doubt that looking at this scene, whether it was the people disguised as the Akatsuki organization or the students, they all felt an inexplicable surprise and absurdity. At this time, Asuma, who took a breath, stood up. His whole right arm was hanging unnaturally, and the joint was obviously twisted and deformed. Obviously, it was fractured. And on Naruto's side, his right arm was also obviously twisted. It can be seen that in the confrontation just now, his arm also suffered a serious injury. But soon, a magical scene happened. Naruto's twisted arm quickly recovered at a speed visible to the naked eye, about 3 or 4 breaths of time. The whole arm was restored to its original state. Not even a trace of injury was left. Asuma furrowed his brows and cursed inwardly. Damn it! How did this brat do it? In the confrontation just now, Asma felt as if he had been hit by a mountain. The strength of the other party was so great that he simply could not accept it, because this kind of strength was not something that Naruto's body should have. Coupled with that terrifying recovery ability, as a Jonin, Asma faintly felt a little guilty. Who at this moment, a breeze blew past. Gale, who had activated Penetrating Escape, had stealthily sneaked behind Naruto. Ningxi, who was lying on the ground, noticed this and immediately shouted, "Naruto, little!" Before Ningxi could finish his words, Naruto turned around abruptly as though he had a pair of white eyes that could see through everything behind him. He threw a punch right at Gale, who was sneaking up on him. Gale was taken aback and immediately raised a long sword in his hand horizontally to protect his front. Clang, with a crisp sound, the long sword that was hit by Naruto's fist broke into two. After taking advantage of the momentum to retreat, Gale looked at the broken sword that was made of fine steel in his hand and gasped. How could this brat have such great strength? At this time, Red quickly formed a seal, and then her whole body turned into a large piece of flying petals, flying around Naruto. Oh no, it's an illusion. Due to his sensitivity to illusion, Sasuke, whose double Magatama Sharingan was slowly rotating in his eye sockets, immediately noticed that Red was casting an illusion on Naruto. Sasuke was sure that only he, who had Sharingan, could resist the illusion of the other party, so he wanted to get up and help Naruto, but just as he stood up, the sharp pain from his abdomen made him lose his balance and fall to the ground. But at this moment, there was a muffled sound of Red being repelled in the distance. Sasuke, who fell to the ground, quickly turned his head and looked, only to see that Red, who had just activated the illusion, had been hit and was leaning against a big tree, panting heavily. Naruto doesn't even have Sharingan. How could he resist the illusion of the Akatsuki members? Sasuke was at a loss for a moment. Naturally, Naruto doesn't have this ability. Even in the Sage mode, he doesn't have the ability to be immune to illusion, and it was actually Ninetales who helped him to dispel the illusion. Today, Naruto and Ninetales indeed have no friendship, but Ninetales, who lives in Naruto's body, is not ignorant of the outside world. It is very clear that the members of the Akatsuki are hunting tailed beasts all over the shinobi world, and they have successfully captured several tailed beasts. So when Naruto was disturbed by Red's illusion, Ninetales mistakenly thought that Red and the others were the real members of the Akatsuki, so it took the initiative to send the tailed beast chakra to Naruto, instantly dispelling the illusion for Naruto. For Ninetales, although Naruto's father, 4 generations, Naruto sealed it and had a lot of conflicts with it, but compared to being captured by the Akatsuki, staying in Naruto's body is obviously safer. Whoosh, another wave of air spread around, and an orange-tailed beast coat appeared on Naruto's body, and the chakra fluctuations on his body suddenly increased more than 10 times. Tailed beast transformation? Asma and the others were shocked and horrified. At this moment, they no longer have the calmness of a Jonin, and all of them looked at Naruto with stunned eyes. Exainya also narrowed his one eye. The fierce chakra that surged out of Naruto's body, even he felt a little uncomfortable. Below Exainya, Sasuke, Ningxi, Sai, and the other students who were gradually waking up raised their hands to cover their faces, because the chakra on Naruto's body was too fierce, causing waves of air to blow, and they almost couldn't open their eyes. Sasuke was shocked. What's going on? Ningxi, who had his Byakugan activated, shook his head. I don't know. My vision is completely filled with chakra. I can't see anything clearly. Ningxi hadn't received high-level Byakugan training, so he didn't know how to adjust and observe the chakra fluctuations, and was blinded by the sudden surge of chakra fluctuations. Just when everyone thought that Naruto was about to lose control and go berserk, because it was the first time he received a large amount of chakra from Ninetales, Naruto, who was at a loss, muttered to himself, What's going on? Hearing Naruto's muttering, Asma, Red, Gale, and Shien all heaved a sigh of relief. This muttering meant that Naruto was still conscious and hadn't gone berserk. This little guy can already control nine tails. But it was precisely because of this that they were shocked. Under normal circumstances, if a Jinchuriki can enter the tailed beast state while conscious, it means that this Jinchuriki has mastered the method of controlling the tailed beast and has become a qualified Jinchuriki. Today, in the ninja world, only the 3 tails Jinchuriki, Tachibana Yagura, and Cloud Village's 8 tails Jinchuriki can do this. Other Jinchuriki, such as 1 tails Jinchuriki Gara, 6 tails Jinchuriki Taka, and 7 tails Jinchuriki Lifu, don't have this ability. Second update. Chapter 699. After entering the tailed beast transformation in Sage mode, the immortal chakra in Naruto's body and the 9 tails chakra intertwined uncontrollably. Whether it is the immortal chakra or the tailed beast chakra, both belong to the extremely high-quality chakra in the shinobi world, and these 2 chakra are extremely corrosive, so after they are intertwined, they quickly penetrate each other and complete a complete fusion, giving birth to a new type of chakra that contains the characteristics of the immortal chakra and the tailed beast chakra. This new type of chakra is extremely majestic. Naruto just stood in the same place and did nothing, but his tailed beast coat stirred up waves of violent air, sweeping around. In the violent air waves, Naruto looked confused. He was also a little confused at this moment. He didn't understand what was going on at all. He only felt that his body seemed to have an inexhaustible and infinite power. Driven by this power, he raised his hand and waved gently. Rumble, the tailed beast coat covering his body, turned into a 10-meter-long orange claw, sweeping everything in front of him in the direction of Naruto's arm. In front of the sharp claws of the tailed beast coat, whether it was a thick tree or a hard rock, all of them were instantly uprooted and completely razed. If Asma and the others hadn't seen the situation quickly and dodged early, this blow would have completely torn them to pieces. After dodging far away, Asma subconsciously reached out to wipe the cold sweat oozing from his forehead, but when he touched the mask, he remembered that he was still wearing the mask. Obviously, Asma was not the only one who was confused. In the face of such a terrifying Naruto, Kurenai, Gale, and Quion are also uneasy at this moment, and they have long lost the pride of a Jonin. One must know that the Jinchuriki in the Berserk state is extremely troublesome even for the powerful 5 great shinobi villages, and it is not something that a few Jonin can easily deal with. Ailer was too unstable and often went on a rampage, causing great losses to the Sand Crypsis. That was why the Sand Crypsis decided to kill him. As for the current Naruto's destructive power, it was almost no different from a Berserk Jinchuriki. Naruto still retained his consciousness and the techniques of a ninja. He also had a top-notch spiritual beast by his side. Therefore, the current Naruto was even more terrifying than some Berserk Jinchuriki and even more difficult to deal with. Clutching his fractured right arm, Asma gritted his teeth and said, "Kuroto really screwed us over." Gale said, "Now that something like this has happened, the leader should be on his way." Shien asked, "Should we reveal our identities now?" Quion frowned and said, "I am worried that even if we reveal our identities, that little brat might not believe us." Looking at Naruto's not very smart look, Kurenai voiced out the worry in her heart. On the student's side, withstanding the waves of air, the students saw through the gaps between their fingertips that Naruto just lightly waved his hand and swept a large area, forcing the 4 Akatsuki members to retreat far away. All of them were stunned. Sakura, who had just woken up, stuttered and asked, "Hey, is that guy really Naruto?" Yakumo, who had also woken up, was shocked. How can Naruto have such a strong chakra? Ziyuin's little hand that was holding the bell finally loosened at this moment. This bell that she carried with her was not only a protective magical artifact, but also a seal that imprisoned her power. Originally, she wanted to remove the seal in a desperate situation and activate the power of the witch to save everyone. Now that she saw that Naruto had stood out, she was relieved and also gave up on the idea of removing the seal. After all, her mother had warned her before she died not to use the power of the witch unless it was absolutely necessary. Damn it! Compared to the other students' shock, Sasuke's heart was filled with unwillingness, a deep unwillingness. He couldn't accept the fact that he, as a genius of the Uchiha clan, was saved by Naruto, who was the weakest among them. He couldn't accept the fact that he couldn't help in the face of a strong enemy and could only be a bystander. Why is it always like this? Ningxi, who was also a genius, had similar thoughts as Sasuke. He thought that this actual combat drill would be a stage to show his talent, but he didn't expect that he would just be lying on the ground and become an insignificant supporting character. Whoosh! At this moment, Kakashi and Jishue hurried to the scene. Jishue didn't care about anything else. She first came to Naruto and shouted, "Naruto, relax, there are no enemies here." Kakashi looked at the towering serpent vigilantly, in case it went berserk and hurt people. Naruto hurriedly pointed at Asuma and said anxiously, "Jishue-sensei, you finally arrived. These Akatsuki members have sneaked into the village. Don't worry, they're not really members of Akatsuki. They were specially invited by the headmaster to test you. They're actually jonin from the village." Seeing that Naruto still retained his consciousness, Jishue couldn't help but sigh in relief. The spinning speed of the 3-Tomo Sharingan also slowed down. Naruto was startled. Asuma and the other three also came forward at this time. One by one, they took off the gray mask on their faces, revealing my ninja head protector under the mask. "Little guy, you really surprised me." In order to maintain the dignity of a jonin, Asuma, who had lost an arm, pretended to make a casual joke. Naruto looked at Asuma, Kurenai, Gale, and Kurenai vigilantly and asked, "Are you really jonin from the village?" Jishue laughed. "You little brat, do you think I would lie to you?" Naruto curled his lips. "The headmaster is too bad." Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. At this time, the sound of wind breaking sounded one after another. One figure after another landed on the battlefield. And in just a moment, the surrounding area was filled with people. The one in the front is naturally the 3 generations Naruto. After discovering that Naruto had entered the tailed beast form on the monitor, the 3 generations Naruto could no longer sit still and immediately led the team into the forest of death. In the view of the 3 generations Naruto, it is impossible for the young Naruto to control the violent 9 tails. So once he entered the tailed beast form, it means that Naruto must have lost control. On the night of the 9 Tails Rebellion, the 3 generations Naruto still remembered the loss of the village, so he was more anxious than anyone else. Equally anxious was Sasuke's father, Uchiha Fuyue. He set off almost at the same time as the 3 generations Naruto, and in order to rescue Sasuke, he was even prepared to expose the Manjikyu Sharingan. After all, in terms of suppressing the raging Jinchuriki, other than the first generations would release, the Manjikyu Sharingan was the most convenient, the first update. Chapter 700. After Mai and the others arrived at the battlefield one after another, they were all on guard. Some of them were on guard against Naruto, who was covered in a layer of tailed beast coat, while others were on guard against a mountain-like giant snake. Because this giant crimson snake gave people a strong sense of oppression, it was not inferior to Naruto, who was wearing a tailed beast coat, and it could not be ignored. At this time, Naruto of the 3 generations walked in front of Naruto vigilantly. Seeing that Naruto's expression was natural and there was no sign of him losing control, he was surprised. Naruto scratched his head. "Grandpa Naruto, I don't know what's going on." As soon as his voice fell, the tailed beast coat covering Naruto's body disappeared. Obviously, after knowing that the person he encountered was not a real member of the Akatsuki organization, the 9 tails in Naruto's body immediately withdrew the tailed beast chakra that had been instilled into Naruto before. With the disappearance of the tailed beast coat, Naruto also naturally exited the sage mode, and the snake-like vertical pupils in his eye sockets also returned to the original clear sky blue color. "It's good that you're okay. It's good that you're okay." Naruto of the 3 generations breathed a long sigh of relief. Although the actual combat exercise held by the ninja school was effective, it was really frightening and he broke out in a cold sweat. Not far away, Fuyue came in front of Sasuke and silently reached out his hand. Looking at his father's outstretched hand, Sasuke, who fell on the ground, reached out and shook it while saying guiltily, "Father, I've brought shame to the family." Fuyue pulled Sasuke up from the ground and did not say anything. Instead, he shifted his gaze upwards and sized up the giant crimson snake in front of him. After close contact, Fuyue found that this giant snake was more aggressive than it looked on the monitor. Even he, the patriarch of the Uchiha clan, could not help but feel a little uneasy in the face of this giant snake. Sasuke looked at Naruto in the distance, who was surrounded by a myriad of stars. He felt upset. Damn it, I actually lost to Naruto. On the other side, Hayashi and Richa arrived in front of Hinata and Ningxi. After checking the injuries on the two children, Hayashi said, "Fortunately, they're just superficial wounds." For this actual combat drill, Hayashi is a little dissatisfied because it's too dangerous. A slight mistake and Hinata, as the eldest daughter of the clan, may lose her life. However, the one who presided over this actual combat drill is Hyojin, so Hayashi naturally will not show his dissatisfaction in front of outsiders. Hinata lowered her head and avoided her father's gaze, but from time to time, her eyes glanced at Naruto, who was talking with the 3 generations Naruto in the distance. Ningxi looked at the giant snake in front of him and was a little lost in thought. There was a little bitterness in his eyes, but also a little bit of imperceptible envy. In the shinobi world, summoning beasts are an important part of the strength of many ninjas. For example, the Inuzuka clan and the Yomi clan in the village have reached the point where they have to rely on summoning beasts and parasitic worms. However, powerful summoning beasts are very rare in the shinobi world, and they can only be found by chance. The reason why the Sannin of Konoha is able to shake the entire shinobi world is because of the Sannin of Konoha, the toad, the snake, and the slug. It is precisely because of these top-notch summoning beasts that the Sannin have the strength to control the outcome of the battle, even in the battlefield of thousands of shinobi. Looking at Ningxi, who was looking up at the giant snake, Richa also moved his gaze towards the giant snake. The giant snake in front of him reminded Richa of the suggestion that Hyojin once put forward to change the predicament of a Hyuga clan. When a Hyuga clan faces giant enemies, such as giant summoning beasts, tailed beasts, etc., there's almost no way for the Hyuga clan to deal with them. The soft fist that the Hyuga clan is proud of is completely like a tickle to these monsters, and these monsters only need to wave their claws and sweep their tails to easily harvest the Jonin and Jonin of the Hyuga clan. And the Uchiha clan, which is also a clan of Dojutsu bloodlines, at least has the Manjikyu Sharingan and the Susanoo, which can directly shake the tailed beast. What does our Hyuga clan have? We don't have anything. Thinking of this, Richa couldn't help but sigh in his heart. The other my ninjas who arrived one after another were also looking at the giant snake in front of them. This kind of giant summoning beast is actually quite rare, even for a Jonin. Humph! Seeing a group of my ninjas pointing at him, the bad-tempered Shinya snorted heavily, and a white mist sprayed out of his nostrils. The surrounding my ninjas were suddenly startled by the cold snort of the giant snake, and their faces showed a look of fear and embarrassment. 3 generations Naruto was also observing the giant snake at this time, and asked Naruto, "Naruto, how did you sign a summoning contract with this giant snake?" "Grandpa Naruto, his name is Shinya. I met him in the Ryuchi cave." After a pause, Naruto asked proudly, "How is it? Shinya is very powerful, right?" 3 generations Naruto nodded with a smile. "Well, he is a very powerful summoning beast." Shinya said impatiently, "Naruto, if there is nothing else, this uncle will go back to sleep." After saying that, without waiting for Naruto to answer, Shinya turned into a puff of white smoke and disappeared without a trace. The giant snake's departure made all the my ninjas present at the scene heave a sigh of relief. Facing such a huge monster, no matter who it was, would more or less feel pressured. 3 generations Naruto looked around and asked Jisue doubtfully, whereas Hyojin, on the other side of the forest of death. Listening to the continuous rumbling sound from afar, Obsidian and Ju looked at each other. Then their bodies flashed and flew in the direction of the rumbling sound. After a while, the two of them suddenly stopped moving. This was because on a big tree not far in front of them, there was a figure wearing a black gold-edged cloak from Amatsukami and a rock pattern mask sitting with his legs down. Xidagarba. Obsidian squinted his eyes and subconsciously went into the illusory state, while Ju also half submerged into the ground. You didn't get blasted to death by my clay clone. The person sitting on the tree branch chuckled and teased. You're really as hard to kill as a cockroach as they say. Umph. Obsidian snorted coldly. As soon as he heard the other party mention the clay clone self-destruction, he was sure that the person in front of him was Amatsukami's organization, Xidagarba, who had fought with him before and caused him to use up one of his 3 Tomo Sharingan. The person sitting on the tree branch stood up and said coldly, Today, I will settle the account with the village. I, Deidara, am not easy to bully. Obsidian secretly said, Xidagarba really is Deidara. At this time, Ju suddenly warned, Be careful. Hearing this, Obsidian's expression turned cold as he found that a few more figures had walked out of the surrounding forest. Glancing at the masks on the faces of these figures one by one, Obsidian frowned and said, Master, Balrog, Windchime, we're actually all in my... The figure wearing the mountain and river mask walked out and said with a smile, You have all fought with him, so this time it should be my turn. I want to see if he really can't be killed. Second update. Chapter 701. Inside the monitoring room, Jiraiya and Tsunade stared at the monitor in front of them with a solemn and nervous expression. Naruto's accidental transformation into a tailed beast is indeed a worrying thing, but compared to the threat of the Akatsuki, Naruto's rampage is a trivial matter. Therefore, they didn't leave the monitoring room with Jishuei and Kakashi, but monitored Hyojin's probing of the Akatsuki members through the secret camera. In the monitor, Hyojin has successfully intercepted the Akatsuki members who sneaked into the village. However, the monitor is silent, and both sides are wearing masks, so it's impossible to read the lips of the two sides, so they can only see the unclear picture of the scene, but not the content of the conversation between the two sides. I should have stopped him just now. This is ridiculous. Tsunade shook her head in annoyance. Until now, she still feels that Hyojin's method of probing the Akatsuki is too rash. If it is seen through, not only will Hyojin's life be in danger, but the village will also suffer. One must know that at this time, Mai is not ready to start a full-scale war with the Akatsuki. Even at the Gakage meeting just now, no specific measures to deal with the Akatsuki were discussed. Jiraiya said, We can only trust him now. I hope he can scare away the Akatsuki. For the current Mai, the best result is that Hyojin can use the prestige of Amatsukami to scare away the 2 Akatsuki members who sneaked into the village, allowing the village to escape this catastrophe. How could such a small trick work? The opponent is the Akatsuki. How can they not see through a mere shadow clone? After a pause, Tsunade continued to complain, Hyojin is too naive. He doesn't have any experience in dealing with the Akatsuki. We shouldn't have let him do this. Tsunade doesn't believe that the Akatsuki that has stirred up a bloodbath in the shinobi world will be scared away by Hyojin. On the side, Yui stared at the monitor nervously, her eyes full of worry. On the side, Uchiha Izumi held Yui's shoulder and comforted her softly. Sensei, Kuroto-senpai, will definitely succeed. Yuri muttered, but he's facing the Akatsuki. Uchiha Izumi smiled and said, Itachi once told me that he is very lucky that in this chaotic era, there is a person like Senior Jing in the village. So don't worry too much, Senior Jing will be fine. Uchiha Izumi unconditionally believed in the judgment of her childhood sweetheart, Itachi Uchiha. Since Itachi believed that Hyojin was a strong person who could save Mai, then she also believed in him. Yui prayed silently, Kuroto-kun, please succeed, in the forest of death. Listening to the taunting of the river master, Bao Tu, whose scars were exposed in front of him, felt ashamed and angry. His face under the whirlpool mask was twisted. As Suijin said, he had indeed been defeated by the members of Amitsukami several times. For example, he was ambushed by Homusubi in the underground palace of the Mizukage building and relied on the forbidden technique, Izanagi, to barely save his life. In the previous battle of Konoha, he fell in the hands of Kazuma, and he also relied on Izanagi to save his life. Not long ago, when he was hunting for Danzo, he was ambushed by Xidagarba's dust release and was forced to suffer the self-destruction of a clay clone in his godly power space. He only escaped with Izanagi's help. So, among the 4 members of Amitsukami in front of him, 3 of them had killed him, and this didn't include the time when he was sealed by another member of Amitsukami, Homusubi, using the divine artifact Tenseigan. "You bastard!" Obsidian glared at Suijin and gritted his teeth. It was precisely because the other party was telling the truth that he felt even more embarrassed. At the same time, he no longer had any doubts about the identity of the members of Amitsukami in front of him, because many of the things that Xidagarba and Suijin said just now are not known to outsiders. So these people in front of him must be the real members of Amitsukami. Moreover, through the Manjikyu Sharingan's insight, Kuroto can confirm that the masks on these people's faces and the cloaks of Amitsukami are real and not simulated by the transfiguration technique. While looking at the members of Amitsukami who appeared one after another, Zetsu reminded Obsidian, "Hey, now is not the time to be impulsive." Whether it was white Zetsu or black Zetsu, both of them were inexplicably shocked at this moment. Because as far as they know, Amitsukami always acts with 2 members, and most of the time only 1 member acts alone, and there has never been a case of more than 2 members acting at the same time. But now, Amitsukami has made an exception and sent 4 members at once, and among them are Hikari and Homusubi, who are very difficult to deal with. It can be seen that this raid on Rock Village has really angered Amitsukami. One must know that according to the internal assessment of the members of Amitsukami, Hikari, who has 2 powerful Kekiai, and Homusubi, is a terrifying existence second only to the leader of Amitsukami, Yama. Whether it is the male Homusubi who wields the divine artifact Hikari, or the female Homusubi who can use Susanoo, both of them are troublesome characters that must be dealt with at the level of a Super Kage. In contrast, Suijin, who is the first to make a name for himself, is less dangerous. According to the internal assessment of Akatsuki, he belongs to the level of an elite jonin. Therefore, being surrounded by such troublesome characters, even if he and Obsidian are proficient in escaping, is still very dangerous. At this moment, another figure slowly walked out of the forest. After seeing the demonic mask on the face of the figure walking towards them, Obsidian and Zetsu's eyes turned cold, and they exclaimed in unison, "Yama!" Being blocked by Suijin, Hikari, Homusubi, and Xidagarba is already extremely dangerous. Now that the leader of Amitsukami, Yama, has appeared, there is no time to distinguish whether the other party is real or fake. Obsidian, who is in the state of illusory, suddenly shrank back and disappeared into the twisting vortex. Zetsu, who is half hidden in the ground, split into 7 or 8 clones, dived into the ground in panic, and fled in different directions. In the main surveillance room, after seeing Obsidian and Zetsu flee in panic, the Mind Ninjas in the central surveillance room immediately cheered. Tsunade was stunned and said, "The members of Akatsuki escaped? They just ran away like that?" Jiraiya was also surprised. Are the people of Akatsuki so easy to deceive? Both of them could not believe that a crisis that could lead to the destruction of my village was actually solved by Hyojin in such a ridiculous way. First update. Chapter 702. Looking at the fleeing Obsidian and Zetsu, Hyojin slowly took off the mask on his face and muttered, "Am I that scary?" Originally, he was still a little hesitant, not knowing what kind of words he should say to scare away Obsidian and Zetsu. After all, the members of Amitsukami around him were all shadow clones, and if he were to make a move, he would be exposed immediately. Moreover, he was also under the surveillance of the secret cameras, so it wasn't convenient for him to make a move. So, he really had a headache on how to scare away Obsidian and Zetsu. But, as soon as he appeared, he didn't even have the time to say a few words. Obsidian and Zetsu ran away in panic. It seems that the fake identity of the strongest in the shinobi world is really useful. Rubbing his chin, Hyojin smiled leisurely. After removing all the shadow clones disguised as members of Amatsukami and retrieving all the black gold-edged cloaks and masks, Hyojin turned his head and looked into the distance. In that direction, the sudden surge of chakra in the distance not only attracted the attention of Obsidian and Zetsu, but also Hyojin. He vaguely remembered that Asuma and the others disguised as members of Akatsuki attacked Sasuke and Naruto's group. And thinking of the 9 tails in Naruto's body, Hyojin suddenly had a bad guess. Swish! With a sway of his body, Hyojin disappeared from where he stood. A moment later, Hyojin arrived at a messy battlefield. Seeing Hyojin coming, Jishuei quickly greeted him. "Kuroto-san, is the matter solved?" Kakashi also came over and looked at Hyojin with an anxious expression. Hyojin smiled and said, "Well, the other party should just be probing and have no intention of launching a large-scale attack. After being scared by me, they didn't bother me and directly retreated." Jishuei and Kakashi heaved a sigh of relief. Although they rushed here to deal with Naruto's tailed beast transformation, they were actually worried about Hyojin, because no one knows how many Akatsuki members sneaked into the village and what they are planning. So, they knew that Hyojin going alone to test the Akatsuki members is very dangerous. Hyojin looked around at the mess and asked, "What happened here?" Jishuei immediately told Hyojin everything that had just happened. In the end, he lamented, "If it weren't for your combat practice, I'm afraid we wouldn't have known that Naruto is so powerful." Kakashi was also quite surprised. "I didn't expect Naruto to have mastered an immortal technique at such a young age." Looking at Naruto, who was surrounded by his peers with a smug look on his face, the corners of Sujin's mouth rose. What happened to Naruto just now may be unimaginable in the eyes of others, but in Hyojin's view, it's nothing more than normal, and he is very clear that Naruto's potential is far more than this. The child of prophecy that can change the world of shinobi is not a joke. At this time, Asuma, Kurenai, Hate, and Suiyin arrived in front of Hyojin. Swinging his broken arm, Asuma complained, "Kuroto, my sacrifice this time is not small. Don't forget to treat me to a meal." Hyojin joked, "You were beaten so badly by a little kid, and you still have a nerve to ask me to treat you to a meal?" Asuma immediately had an awkward expression on his face. Is that kid an ordinary kid? That's an immortal technique. There aren't many ninjas in the shinobi world who have mastered immortal techniques. Moreover, you didn't see it. That kid actually has a top-notch shinobi with him. Look around, it was that shinobi who did it. With just a sweep of its tail, the whole forest was turned upside down. The scene of a typhoon passing through the forest added a lot of persuasiveness to Asuma's words. Hyojin smiled and patted Asuma's shoulder. "Don't worry, you won't miss a big meal." After chatting with everyone for a while, Hyojin came to the 3 generations of Naruto and reported to the 3 generations of Naruto that the Akatsuki members sneaked into the Forest of Death, and also reported the result of his probe. After listening to Hyojin's report, the 3 generations of Naruto sighed faintly. "Thank you for your hard work. For the 3 generations of Naruto, this is already the best result. After all, the 5 great shinobi villages are not ready for a decisive battle with the Akatsuki organization, nor have they formulated corresponding strategies and tactics. Because of Naruto's unexpected tailed beast transformation, the 3 generations of Naruto personally intervened, causing the actual combat drill to end prematurely. The villagers who gathered at the venue outside the Forest of Death returned to their village while talking about Naruto's performance in the actual combat drill in high spirits. Whether it is Shinya or the tailed beast transformation of the Jinchuriki, both are very rare, so it can be foreseen that these will become the topic of conversation for the villagers of my village in the next few weeks or even months. Naruto's bravery and fearlessness when protecting his companions also changed the villagers' impression of Naruto a lot. On the way back to the village, almost no one would call Naruto as a fox demon, which was a discriminatory term to him. A few days passed in a flash, and the impact of the actual combat drill organized by the ninja school is still fermenting. The biggest change is undoubtedly Naruto. With the word of mouth of the villagers who watched the actual combat drill, Naruto suddenly became a celebrity in the village, and everyone no longer evaded him like before. At the same time, the major clans of my village have also paid more attention to the assessment of the ninja school, and in private, they have strengthened the training of their children, making the students complain incessantly. Hyuga Clan. On the way to the Hyuga clan residence, Hyojin asked Richa, beside him, why is there a sudden clan meeting? Unlike the Uchiha clan that holds the clan meeting every 2 or 3 days, the frequency of the Hyuga clan's clan meeting is not high. If there is no major event, it is even difficult to hold a clan meeting once a year. Therefore, Hyojin is a little curious about this sudden clan meeting. Richa shook his head. I don't know. In short, be careful. Be careful. Slightly startled, Hyojin saw Richa's solemn face and a little worry in his eyes. So he asked again, what happened? Richa pondered for a while and said, I don't know much about the specific situation, but I've vaguely heard that the Hyuga clan seems to be a little dissatisfied with Ningxi's performance this time. Hyojin frowned. Dissatisfied with Ningxi's performance? What do you mean? Among the students in the same batch, Ningxi is already very good. Even compared with Uchiha and Sasuke, he is not much worse. Richa, who wanted to say something more, saw that the Hyuga clan residence was in front of him. So he swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth and just sighed. His expression was full of helplessness. Second update. Chapter 703. Glancing at the crowded family meeting hall, Hyojin was thoughtful. The scale of his clan meeting is somewhat beyond his expectations. Almost all the Jonins, especially the Jonins, and even some senior Chunins were present. He even saw Hyuga Yui in the crowd who has never participated in the clan meeting. What the hell are those guys doing this time? After curling his lips, Hyojin sat next to Richa and sat on a futon. Not long after, a group of people led by the clan leader, Hayashi, walked into the great hall. There are a total of 4 people attending the family meeting this time. In addition to the patriarch Hayashi, the other 3 are the elders who control the power of the Hyuga clan. With the arrival of the Hyuga clan, the family meeting officially began. As the patriarch, Hayashi sat in the main seat with a serious expression, but he was silent and seemed to have no intention of speaking at all. The Hyuga clansmen looked at each other. Cough. At this time, a patriarch coughed twice and said, Today's family meeting is to discuss what happened in the recent ninja school actual combat drill. What happened in the actual combat drill? Is it about Nine Tails' Jinchuriki? Do you want to discuss some mortal arts? As soon as the patriarch's voice fell, the members of the Hyuga branch who participated in the family meeting began to talk. The patriarch immediately raised his hand and signaled everyone to be quiet, and then his eyes fell on Richa. The matter of Nine Tails' Jinchuriki has nothing to do with our Hyuga clan. Today's family meeting is to discuss the child Ningxi. A Jonin from the Hyuga family asked in confusion. Although Niji's performance in the actual combat drill this time is not brilliant, but it is also in line with the rules, he did not bring shame to our Hyuga clan, right? Yes. Well, Ningxi is not worse than the kid of the Uchiha family this time. If it weren't for the Nine Tails' Jinchuriki, Ningxi's expression would actually be reasonable. The members of the branch family all chimed in. Oomph. The Zone clan elder suddenly snorted coldly. This cold snort caused the clamor in the hall to stop abruptly, and all the branch family members participating in the meeting consciously shut their mouths. Coldly glancing at the branch family members in the hall, the ancestral elder sternly scolded. As a ninja of Mai, Ningxi's performance is indeed impeccable. But don't forget that he is not only a Mai ninja, but also a member of the Hyuga clan. In the face of a strong enemy that he can't resist, he should prioritize the safety of the eldest daughter of the Hyuga clan, instead of entangling with the strong enemy, like a reckless man. Speaking up to here, the Zone clan elder stared intently at Richa as he asked, enunciating each word clearly. This old man is extremely curious. Is he purely stupid, or has he completely forgotten the most noble mission of dividing the clan? Richa, can you answer this question for this old man? There is no doubt that this time Ningxi did not prioritize the safety of Hinata in the actual combat drill, but chose to fight against the strong enemy with all his partners. The Zone clan expressed strong dissatisfaction. In the eyes of the Zone clan, the biggest mission of the branch family is to protect the Zone clan. The interests of the Zone clan should be higher than parents, higher than brothers, higher than the village, higher than everything. The shouts continued to echo in the hall. However, in the hall full of members of the branch family, except for the shouts of the Zone clan elder, there was silence. In the face of the dissatisfaction of the Zone clan, the members of the branch family all looked anxious. Even some Jonins were no exception. At this time, Richa slowly lowered his body and put his forehead on the ground. I'm sorry, I didn't teach him well. Looking at the humble younger brother below, Hayashi, who was sitting on a main seat, had a complicated expression. From an emotional point of view, he did not want to see this scene in front of him, but as the head of the family, he had to protect the interests of the Zone clan, even if it was against his original intention. Richa's deference did not completely dispel the anger of the Zone clan elder. He deliberately let Richa maintain a low posture and waved to the servant beside him. The servant hurriedly stepped forward and poured a cup of tea for the Zone clan elder. After raising the teacup and taking a sip, the Zone clan elder said slowly, Richa, you have to understand a truth. If you even forget your own duty, then no matter how outstanding you are, there is no meaning in your existence. A thin layer of sweat suddenly appeared on Richa's forehead, and he nodded repeatedly. I understand. Ningxi will not make such a mistake in the future. Due to the existence of the caged bird, the Zone clan controlled the life and death of the branch family members. No matter how strong the branch family members were, the Zone clan only needed to activate the caged bird curse to control the life and death of the branch family members. Therefore, when the Zone clan elder said, there is no meaning in your existence, it was not an empty threat, but a practical warning. One must know, although there were not many cases of the Zone clan executing the branch family members, it was not unheard of. The atmosphere in the hall became even more oppressive. The tens of branch family members all shut their mouths, and the hall was so quiet that one could even hear each other's breathing and heartbeats. Looking at the silent branch family members in front of them, the Zone clan elders looked at each other and smiled. With regards to this result, the three of them were not surprised. From their point of view, all the branch family members in the Zone clan had already been tamed. As long as they displayed the power of the Zone clan, the branch family members would definitely keep quiet out of fear. Suddenly, the Zone clan elder noticed the expressionless Hyojin in the crowd. Unlike the other branch family members around him, Hyojin's eyes were clear. There was neither fear nor hidden anger in his eyes, not even a trace of fear that ordinary people should have. The Zone clan elder's eyes narrowed and said, Hyojin, as Ningxi's teacher, Ningxi's mistake this time also has an unavoidable responsibility. And it is too reckless. Why didn't you report the actual combat drill plan to the Zone clan in advance? This kind of combat drill that cannot be evaluated safely. How dare you hide it from the Zone clan? In an instant, everyone's eyes focused on Hyojin. Richa on the side was afraid that Hyojin was young and impetuous and would do something stupid, so he winked at him repeatedly, signaling him to temporarily give in to the Zone clan. In Richa's view, Hyojin, who is now the headmaster of the ninja school, has quite a lot of prestige in the village. As long as he is willing to give in, the Zone clan won't punish him too much. Kuroto, who was sitting at the edge of the hall, was shocked and afraid at this moment, looking at Hyojin with a pleading face. She was very clear about Hyojin's character. She knew that although Hyojin was usually amiable, he was actually a very assertive person, unwilling to be bound by anything, and had a ruthless spirit in his bones. But at the same time, she understood that no matter how strong Hyojin was, in front of the caged bird, he had no ability to resist, so she could only look at Hyojin, praying that things would not develop in a bad direction. In the corner, a member of the Hyojin branch family who had an extremely weak sense of presence also cast a curious gaze at Hyojin at this moment. First chapter. Chapter 704. The reason why Hyojin suddenly became the focus of everyone's attention in the hall is that he is no longer the cannon fodder of the Third Shinobi World War. Now, as the headmaster of the ninja school, he already has a lot of real power and is qualified to attend high-level meetings of the My Clan. And as the new generation of my ninjas, his excellence is also obvious to all. At the moment, more and more my ninjas began to call Hyojin the Uchiha Jishue of the Uchiha clan, and Hatake Kakashi, the disciple of 4 generations. The 3 of them are regarded as the new generation of my Sanin. Because of this member of the Hyuga branch in the corner is very curious about what kind of attitude Hyojin, a high-spirited young branch member, will deal with when faced with the censure of the elder of the clan. Feeling the gaze of everyone in the hall, Hyojin slowly stood up. Richa, who was crouching on the side, blinked at him repeatedly, almost changing from a hint to an explicit expression. The expression on his face was extremely anxious, almost to the point of directly persuading him. A little further away, Kuroto directly knelt on the ground, looking at Hyojin with eyes full of pleading. She faintly felt that the thing she didn't want to see the most may be about to happen, so she fell into endless panic at this moment. Her eyes were locked on Hyojin's body, her heart almost hanging in her throat. Looking at Yui, who had tears on her cheeks and eyes full of crystal tears, Kuroto showed her a gentle smile as usual. At this time, the elder of the clan frowned and asked, "Hyojin, stand up. Do you have something to say?" In the view of the elder of the clan, at this time, Hyojin should be like Richin next to him, lowering his body and head to the ground to show obedience and respect to the clan. Hyojin turned his head and glanced at the Zone clan elder as his lips curled into an arc. The ancestral elder was puzzled. What are you trying to do?" Not knowing why, an ominous premonition suddenly surged in his heart. But in the blink of an eye, he suppressed this ominous premonition, because in his opinion, no matter how gutsy Hyojin was, he wouldn't dare to do anything disrespectful to him, a member of the ancestral clan. Swish! Just at this moment, Hyojin's figure flashed, and with a speed that was close to phantom-like, he directly appeared in front of the 3 elders' door. "You? What are you doing? How dare you?" The 3 elders sitting on the praying mats were all taken aback, and each of them wanted to stand up. With a faint smile on his face, Hyojin stretched out his hands and grabbed onto the sleeves of the 2 Zone clan elders, pulling them into his embrace. At the same time, his right knee viciously slammed into the lower jaw of the Zone clan elder in the middle. Bang bang, with a few dull thuds, the heads of the 3 Zone clan elders collided with each other. At this moment, Hyojin flipped his hand and smashed the 3 Zone clan elders into a pile, and then stepped on the face of the Zone clan elder who had just reprimanded him. Finally, he slowly turned his head and shifted his gaze to the patriarch, Hayashi, who was at the side. Hyojin's sudden attack, without warning, not only caught the 3 Zone clan elders off guard, but also shocked Hayashi, who was at the side. However, just as Hayashi subconsciously wanted to activate the caged bird curse seal to restrain the violent Hyojin, his instinct told him that once he did so, there would be an unpredictable and huge disaster. Therefore, the hesitant Hayashi was stunned on the patriarch's seat, and he could only watch helplessly as Hyojin easily took care of the 3 Zone clan elders. As expected, you don't have the courage to make a move. Looking at the surprised and uncertain face of Hayashi, Hyojin sighed in his heart. Hyuga Hayashi is actually a weak person. In the original time and space, facing the decision of the village to hand him over to appease the anger of the Cloud Village, he did not have the courage to resist and could only accept it passively. In the end, his younger brother Richo lost his life because of him. And in the face of the powerful 7th-generation Naruto, he also failed to implement the centuries-old tradition of the Hyuga clan and engraved the caged bird curse on the Vortex Sunflower, who is the daughter of Naruto's wife Hinata and Naruto's daughter. It can be said that the current generation of Patriarch Uchiha and Patriarch Hyuga both like to put on a stern face on the surface and put on a resolute and decisive appearance. But in fact, both of them are weak inside and don't have the responsibility of a patriarch. In the original time and space, the reason why the Hyuga clan has a better ending than the Uchiha clan is that the Hyuga clan doesn't like to cause trouble and Hinata has a good vision. Stepping on the head of the elder of the clan, Hyojin still looked at Hayashi and said lightly, "I know that the clan only wants a group of obedient dogs, but in the current chaotic shinobi world, a group of dogs that can only bark can't protect the clan. Our Hyuga clan is one of the 2 clans of my clan, but even a little kid like Naruto has the ability to destroy our entire clan. At this time, it's time to put aside the matter of self-castration." The elder of the clan, who was stepped on by Hyojin, said angrily, "Rebel. Rebel. Hyojin, do you know what you are doing?" With that said, he was about to use the cage bird curse seal to punish Hyojin, but just as he was about to use it, he was shocked to find that the chakra in his body couldn't be used at all. The 2 elders who were thrown to the ground by Hyojin also recovered at this moment and hurriedly tried to use the cage bird curse seal, but they were also surprised to find that they couldn't use the chakra in their body. How can this be? Pulling open their clothes to take a look, they found that Hyojin had quietly engraved the 4-symbol seal on their bodies. The ink-colored seal pattern covered their whole body and completely imprisoned their chakra. Looking at the hysterical elders of the clan, Hyojin smiled and said, "I know what I am doing very well. It's you who don't understand." The elder of the clan, who was stepped on by Hyojin, roared, "The clan is the root. You are offending your superiors. Do you want to destroy the Hyuga clan?" Hyojin shook his head, his eyes slowly swept across the audience, and said, "If the clan is gone, the Hyuga clan is still the Hyuga clan, but if the entire clan is gone, then it is really over." Listening to Hyojin's calm tone, several elders of the clan felt a chill in their hearts at the same time, because this time they really felt the indifference and carelessness Hyojin had towards them and the clan. In the face of Hyojin's surprise attack on the elder of the clan, dozens of branch family members in the hall filled with dozens of branch family members did not step forward to stop him. Everyone just sat in their seats silently, as if nothing had happened in front of them. The hall was silent as usual. Second update. Chapter 705. An elder barely propped himself up and roared fiercely at the hall. "What are you guys doing? Didn't you see Hyojin's disobedience?" However, there was still silence in response to him. "You?" After perceiving the strange silence in the hall, the elder's momentum suddenly weakened a bit. He, who has always been pampered, realized how much resentment the members of the branch family have accumulated in their hearts. If the entire branch family revolts against the Hyuga clan, then even if there is a cage bird curse, it will not solve any problem, because without the branch family, the Hyuga clan is like a tiger without teeth, and the few remaining members of the Hyuga clan can't support a big clan at all. At this time, as the head of the clan, Hayashi finally spoke. He did not care about the 3 elders on the side, but looked at Hyojin and asked seriously, "Kuroto, do you think Ningxi did not do anything wrong this time?" Hyojin replied, "He tried his best." Hayashi then said, "But he failed to protect Hinata. This is the truth. Hinata is indeed the eldest daughter of the Hyuga clan, but she is first and foremost a ninja. She is my student." After a pause, Hyojin said lightly, "As a ninja, she should be prepared to die at any time. If she dies in this actual combat exercise, it can only mean that she has neither strength nor a little luck." The elder who was stepped on by Hyojin roared, "You bastard! Hinata is a member of the Hyuga clan. She is the future head of the clan. It is natural for Ningxi to protect her." Hyojin chuckled and said, "When a ninja puts his own life and death on the protection of others, he is no longer a qualified ninja. And if she is not even a qualified ninja, How can she be the head of the Hyuga clan in the future? Hayashi frowned and said, Kuroto, you are too extreme. No, you have been blinded by your family's past glory, and your wills have been corrupted by the privileges you were born with. I can't see the changes in the shinobi world, nor can I detect the danger that is close at hand. Hyojin paused for a moment before he glanced at the Zone clan elder that was trampled beneath his feet, and he ridiculed. Just like these few geezers, they've already weakened to the point that they can't even activate the cage bird curse before me. It's truly inconceivable. When the three ancestral clan elders heard this, they were both embarrassed and angry. Hayashi had an awkward expression on his face. Hyojin slowly said, The caged bird is just a tool. What truly allows the Zone family to maintain their authority is their actual strength, and not the intimidation of the caged bird. The responsibility of the ancestral clan should be to protect the clan and intimidate the weak. When the ancestral clan feels that they should enjoy the protection of the branch clan, the bones of the ancestral clan have already softened. After saying this, Hyojin released the Zone clan elder that was trampled under his feet, and while walking out of the hall, he said casually, I still have a lot of things to deal with, so I will take my leave first. The Zone clan elder quickly climbed up from the ground and shouted at the back of Hyojin. Hyojin, don't think that just because you have the protection of the 3 generations, you can do whatever you want. In the view of the Zone clan elder, the reason why Hyojin dared to act so unscrupulously is because he is the direct descendant of the 3 generations Naruto and the headmaster of the ninja school. Hey, Hyojin stopped, but didn't say anything, just sighed. The Zone clan elder still doesn't understand that the reason why Hyojin can do whatever he wants is not because of someone's protection, but because of Hyojin's own strength. The Zone clan elder continued to roar. The branch clan should protect the Zone family. This is a matter of course. The strong don't need protection. After answering indifferently, Hyojin left the Zone clan mansion without looking back. Looking at the back of Hyojin leaving, the few Zone clan elders looked at each other, and from each other's eyes, they all saw anger and a trace of unconcealable fear. The source of this fear is that when Hyojin disobeyed the Zone clan elder, he was too calm. From the beginning to the end, he maintained a calm mood and even had a smile on his face. And according to common sense, when the branch clan rebelled against the Zone clan, they would either be proud of themselves and sweep away their previous grievances, or they would be hysterical and vent the anger in their hearts. But Hyojin didn't act like that, as if he didn't hate the Zone clan, or rather, he wasn't like the ordinary members of the branch clan who care about the Zone clan so much. It is this disregard that seeped out from the bones that is the source of the fear of the Zone clan elders. Angrily coming in front of Hayashi, the Zone clan elder shouted, Hayashi, why didn't you use the cage bird curse to punish Hyojin just now? Hayashi said with a tired look, Forget it. Forget it. One of the Zone clan elder suddenly raised his tone and said angrily, How can we just forget it like this? The dignity of our Zone clan is not allowed to be violated by the branch clan. The Zone clan finally has an outstanding member. Do we want to destroy him with our own hands? What will the 3 generations think of us? What will the other people in the village think of us? I can't let such a farce happen in our Hyuga clan. After Hayashi finished speaking, he got up and left the hall because he had already seen that the elders' endless chatter was just to cover up their own fear and uneasiness. Even if they were really given a chance, they probably wouldn't dare to make a move against Hyojin. Thinking of this, Hayashi suddenly realized that even he himself might not have the determination to fall out with Hyojin, so he thought in his heart, maybe Kuroto is right. The bones of the Zone clan have long been soft. When passing by the practice field, Hayashi stood in front of the window and looked at his daughter, Hinata, who was sweating and working hard to practice soft fist. Suddenly, Hayashi felt that daring to throw himself at the daughter of an Akatsuki member for the sake of his companions didn't seem as mediocre as he thought in the past. On the playground of the ninja school, looking from afar at Naruto, who was surrounded by the students like stars around the moon, Sasuke, who was leaning against a big tree in the corner, had a bad feeling in his heart. Before this, He was the focus of the ninja school and the target of all his classmates. For this reason, he even felt annoyed and distressed. But now that there was less attention, for some reason, he just felt uncomfortable all over. At this time, Ningxi walked over slowly and asked, "Why are you hiding here?" Sasuke curled his lips and said, "I'm too lazy to listen to Naruto brag about himself." Ningxi turned his head and looked at the triumphant Naruto in the playground and said, "He deserves this glory." Sasuke opened his mouth, but he couldn't say anything. In the end, he just nodded and agreed with Ningxi's words, then turned and walked out of the school. Ningxi asked, "Going back so early? Aren't you going to cultivate today?" Sasuke waved his hand and said, "It's fine. The clan has arranged a contract test for me today. Here's the first update." Chapter 706. Ningxi was puzzled and asked, "Sumeru Beast contract test?" "Yeah." Sasuke nodded his head, and his eyes unconsciously shifted to Naruto in the playground. After the actual combat drill a few days ago, Sasuke inquired his brother about the reason why Naruto suddenly became stronger, and from Itachi, he learned that the reason why Naruto was able to fight against Asuma and the others who were Jonin is because Naruto has learned immortal jutsu. One must know that even in the Mai, the head of the 5 great shinobi villages, immortal jutsu is a very rare word. Looking at the entire history of Mai, only the first Naruto and Jiraiya have mastered immortal jutsu. Among them, Jiraiya is unable to enter sage mode alone and needs the assistance of the 2 toad sages, Fukasaku and Shima. Therefore, even Itachi found it difficult to explain to Sasuke what immortal jutsu is. However, as a member of the Uchiha clan, Sasuke has the Sharingan that others envy, so he is not too envious of Naruto's immortal jutsu. In his opinion, as long as he can dig out the potential of his Sharingan and awaken the Manjikyu Sharingan, then even Naruto's immortal jutsu will be overshadowed in front of his Sharingan. However, Naruto's Sumeru Beast is something that makes Sasuke envious. In fact, Naruto's immortal jutsu is also sometimes ineffective, and the reason why Naruto suddenly became so popular in the ninja school is inseparable from the fact that he has a top Sumeru Beast in the ninja world. It can be said that with a Sumeru Beast at the level of Exainya, even if Naruto doesn't know any immortal jutsu, he is still a strong person above Jonin. Because of this, Sasuke is also eager to have a Sumeru Beast of his own, so he made a request to his father, who is the patriarch of the Uchiha clan. In the face of Sasuke's request, Fuyue only pondered for a moment and then agreed. And today is the day that Fuyue arranged for Sasuke to take the Sumeru Beast contract test. Looking at Sasuke leaving in a hurry with a face full of anticipation, Ningxi felt sour in his heart. He naturally wants to be like Naruto and have a powerful Sumeru Beast. Unfortunately, the Hyuga clan specializes in jutsu, so they don't have a Sumeru Beast passed down in their clan, nor do they have a familiar clan of ninja beasts. So, we made this request to his father, Richa. Yesterday, Richa felt very guilty and expressed his helplessness. In the Uchiha clan, after returning to the mansion, Sasuke found his father and asked anxiously, "Father, I'm back. When can I start the test of the Sumeru Beast contract?" Fuyue said with a straight face as usual, "Come with me." And Sasuke nodded heavily and quickly followed behind Fuyue. On the way, Sasuke couldn't hold back the excitement in his heart and asked curiously, "Father, what kind of Sumeru Beast did you arrange for me?" Fuyue said, "Our Uchiha clan has a harmonious relationship with the Ninja Cat clan in the Land of Cats. When choosing a Sumeru Beast, we usually choose a Ninja Cat from the Land of Cats." Sasuke nodded and asked, "Well, then father, how big is the Ninja Cat you arranged for me? Is it as big as Naruto's Sumeru Beast, Exainya?" Fuyue glanced at Sasuke and explained, "Sasuke, you have to understand that a Sumeru Beast like Exainya is very rare in the shinobi world. Even our Uchiha clan doesn't have a channel to contact it for the time being. The Ninja Cat I arranged for you is a young Ninja Cat from the Land of Cats. Its size is about the same as a house cat, but it has mastered a lot of ninjutsu and can be of some help in battle." Sasuke was disappointed. As big as a house cat? What's the use of that? Fuyue stopped and said in a deep voice, "Our Uchiha clan has an unparalleled Sharingan. No matter what kind of Sumeru beast it is nothing in front of our Sharingan. Therefore, Sumeru beasts are just a kind of assistance to our Uchiha clan. Only the Sharingan is our true core." Oh, after a depressed response, Sasuke pouted and asked, "Then what is brother's Sumeru beast?" "Itachi." Fuyue paused and took a step forward again. "Your brother followed Jishuei and chose the ninja crow style." Ninja crow style? Brother's Sumeru beast is a ninja crow? Sasuke was stunned for a moment and hurriedly asked, "Father, can I choose a ninja crow? I want to be like brother." Fuyue shook his head. "You are not suitable for the ninja crow style." The core of the ninja crow style was to show off, so it required an extremely meticulous mind and superb chakra application skills. In the Uchiha clan, only Jishuei and Itachi chose the ninja crow style. As for the other Uchiha, such as Uchiha Shinichi, Uchiha Ryota, and other elites, all chose the ninja cat style without exception. As Sasuke's father, Fuyue, was very clear that although Sasuke's talent was good, he was not the kind of meticulous illusion type like Itachi and Jishuei, but the more typical ninja technique type Uchiha. Although his control of chakra was stronger than others, compared to the top like Itachi and Jishuei, there was still a relatively obvious gap, so it was not suitable for the ninja crow style. Sasuke's expression became a little more gloomy when he heard this. In the headmaster's office, "You want a summoning beast?" Looking at Ningxi's somewhat reserved expression in front of him, Hyojin was slightly surprised. He had just returned to the headmaster's office from the clanland, and his but hadn't even warmed up when Ningxi came to the door with a bashful face. After asking, he learned that Ningxi actually wanted a summoning beast. Ningxi nodded and said expectantly, "Sensei, I know this request is very presumptuous, but father told me that in the Hyuga clan, maybe only you have a way. It's just a summoning beast, it's not a troublesome thing." After a smile, Hyojin casually asked while reviewing the documents, "What kind of summoning beast do you want?" Hyojin is very clear that Ningxi was mostly stimulated by Naruto, and the purpose of holding the actual combat drill is to let the students compete with each other, so he doesn't care about it. Ningxi blurted out, "Sensei, I want to have a summoning beast like Naruto." Hyojin raised his head, like, "Exainya?" Ningxi lightly nodded. After pondering for a moment, Hyojin said, "Exainya is a ninja from the Ryuchi Cave, one of the 3 Holy Lands. Ordinary summoning beasts in the ninja world can't be compared to him. If you want to find a summoning beast on the same level as Exainya, you can only search in the 3 Holy Lands, but I don't have any friendship with the 3 Holy Lands." Ningxi lowered his head. "I was too greedy." Hyojin chuckled. "For a ninja, there is nothing wrong with pursuing strength. Sensei, I will take my leave." After respectfully bowing to Hyojin, Ningxi walked out of the office. Hyojin called out to Ningxi, "Wait a moment, I can help you think of a solution for this matter." Second update. Chapter 707. Hyojin wasn't surprised by the fact that Naruto mastered Sage Jutsu, but the fact that Naruto learned Sage Jutsu from the Ryuchi Cave surprised him. Although the 3 holy lands of the shinobi world are called Holy Lands, the one who has the deepest involvement in the affairs of the shinobi world has always been Mount Myaboku. In the past, when the 2 brothers rebelled against their mother Kagaya's cruel rule, it was actually the great Toad Sage of Mount Myaboku who secretly guided them. It can be said that the birth of the shinobi world, and even the origin of shinobi, is inseparable from the great Toad Sage of Mount Myaboku. In the following 1,000 years, the great Toad Sage never stopped paying attention to the shinobi world, especially at the critical moment when the shinobi world was about to usher in a revolution. The great Toad Sage deliberately created a coincidence and sent the righteous Jiraiya to Mount Myaboku. With the help of Jiraiya, the great Toad Sage searched all over the shinobi world for the key person who could decide the future of the shinobi world, the child of the prophecy. At that time, the real child of the prophecy, Naruto, wasn't even born yet. From this, it can be seen that Mount Myaboku has always been paying attention to the shinobi world, and it can even be said that he has been influencing the shinobi world. Now that the child of the prophecy, Naruto, has become a disciple of the White Snake Sage of the Ryuchi Cave, with Mount Myaboku's habit of interfering in the affairs of the shinobi world, regardless of whether or not the Great Toad Sage has confirmed that Naruto is the child of the prophecy, he will be eagerly looking for a new spokesperson. A spokesperson who can help Mount Myaboku continue to exert its influence in the shinobi world. And this is an opportunity for Ningxi, because this kind of use is mutual. While Mount Myaboku is using a spokesperson to exert its influence in the shinobi world, being chosen as a spokesperson by Mount Myaboku also means that he has the full support of Mount Myaboku. It was the same for Jiraiya and Naruto in the original space and time. After straightening out his thoughts, Hyojin smiled at Ningxi and said, "Go back and prepare first. I will fight for a chance to enter Mount Myaboku for you in the near future. As for whether you can pass the test and obtain the recognition of the Great Toad Sage, that will depend on you." Ningxi's eyes reddened, and he said emotionally, "Teacher, thank you." Hyojin casually waved his hand. "Silly boy, there's no need to be so polite with me. I just hope that you can understand that if you want to control your own fate, you have to fight for it." Ningxi nodded and left the principal's office in excitement. Early the next morning, Hyojin took the time to look for Jiraiya and told him the purpose of his visit. After listening to Hyojin's request, Jiraiya was a little surprised. "Why do you want me to take Ningxi to Mount Myaboku?" Hyojin smiled and explained, "Naruto not only learned Senjutsu in the Ryuchi Cave, but he also signed a contract with a summoning beast like Exainya. This greatly stimulated the children in the school. So, Ningxi specifically came to me, hoping to get a summoning beast like Exainya. But Exainya came from the Ryuchi Cave, which is very rare in the shinobi world, so I thought of Mount Myaboku." Jiraiya nodded. He has always been paying attention to Naruto, so he is very clear about the sensation that Naruto caused in the village after he showed Exainya in the actual combat drill. Seeing that Jiraiya was silent, Hyojin calmly asked, "Can I?" After carefully weighing the pros and cons, Jiraiya finally agreed. "Well, the village owes you a favor for the last time, and this time I will return it to you on behalf of the old man." If it was someone else, Jiraiya would never agree so easily. There are thousands of my ninjas, but Jiraiya only taught the inheritance of Mount Myaboku to his direct disciple, Naruto, for generations. He didn't even teach Kakashi, who is considered as his grand disciple. One can imagine how cautious Jiraiya is in selecting the successor of Mount Myaboku. The reason why he can't say no to Suijin this time is because Suijin risked his life to test the Akatsuki members and successfully scare them away during the actual combat exercise. Suijin's actions are not that simple. In Jiraiya's view, it is because of Hyojin's decisiveness that the village was not ravaged by the flames of war. But this matter involves Amatsukami and Akatsuki, so it is not convenient to make it public in the village. Therefore, 3 generations Naruto can't find a suitable reason to reward Hyojin. So Naruto owes Hyojin a big favor for this matter. Seeing that Jiraiya agreed, Hyojin smiled and said, "Thank you so much. You don't have to thank me so quickly. I can only promise you that I'll give Niji a chance. As for whether he can find a suitable spiritual beast in Mount Myaboku, that's not up to me to decide." Jiraiya's tone changed to that of a businesslike one. Hyojin nodded in understanding. Jiraiya continued, "I promise you this time only to reward you on behalf of the village for dealing with the infiltration of the Akatsuki members. So, you can still go back on your words, because once I bring Ningxi to Mount Myaboku, the village will not give you any other reward." Hyojin smiled. "Then I will have to trouble you with Ningxi." Seeing that Hyojin has no intention of going back on his words, Jiraiya nodded and said, "Okay, tell Ningxi to get ready and wait for my notice in the next 2 days." At noon, Hyojin told Ningxi about this news and told Ningxi to rest for the next 2 days to deal with the test he might encounter in Mount Myaboku. In the evening, Hisashi suddenly paid a visit to Seiji. After welcoming Richa into the house, Hyojin casually asked, "What's wrong? What's the matter?" Richa had a look of gratitude on his face as he said to Hyojin, "I heard from Ningxi that you fought for a precious chance to go to Mount Mayaboku to look for a summoned beast." Hyojin poured a cup of tea for Richa and said, "I am Ningxi's teacher. This is what I should do. Letting Ningxi take you as his teacher is indeed the best decision I have ever made." After sighing with emotion, Hisashi continued, "But you were still too reckless at the family meeting yesterday, which put the elders of his own family in a very awkward position. After the meeting, the elders said that they would punish you severely." Hyojin grinned and said, "If they really dared to, they wouldn't have said those words." Naturally, Richa understood this as well. With a light laugh, he pointed at the caged bird curse mark on his forehead and said, "However, we are still a branch family, after all. It's better not to make things too awkward with the Zone clan." Hyojin glanced at Richa and said, "Don't tell me you want me to apologize to those elders. If you knew how to apologize, you wouldn't have made a move yesterday." After shaking his head with a bitter smile, Richa said, "It's like this. After the Zone clan found out that you fought for a chance to go to Mount Mayaboku for Ningxi, they hoped to bring Hinata along to try their luck. However, the elders of the Zone clan were just beaten up by you, and they couldn't bring themselves to do it, so..." Hyojin smiled and continued, "So they sent you to be the lobbyist? Here's the first update." Chapter 708. Looking at Rich's expression, Hyojin finally understood what was going on. Because of Naruto's outstanding performance in the actual combat exercise, Ryuchi Cave, as well as Mount Mayaboku and Shikatsu Forest, came into the public's view, and many of my ninjas were familiar with them. And when they learned that Hyojin fought for an opportunity for Ningxi to enter Mount Mayaboku, one of the three holy lands, the Zone family immediately realized that this was a good opportunity to improve the family's strength, and they couldn't miss it. It's just that the two sides parted on bad terms at the family meeting, and now even Hayashi, who didn't completely fall out with Hyojin, was embarrassed to come to Hyojin. Therefore, the Zone family had to entrust Richa, who had a good relationship with Hyojin, to be the lobbyist. They are not stupid. They know that this opportunity is precious. After chuckling, Hyojin nodded. "Okay, I'll arrange it and let Hinata go to Mount Mayaboku to try her luck." Letting Ningxi go to Mount Mayaboku was originally a temporary idea of Hyojin, so it didn't matter if one more person was added. What's more, Hyojin liked Hinata. Hinata looked shy and timid, but she was very tough. In the original time and space, when Nagato attacked the surrounding ninjas saw Naruto being controlled by the Tendo, but they didn't dare to come forward to help. Only Hinata rushed forward alone and faced the Tendo. Not to mention, this courage alone is something that many people don't have. Great! Seeing that Hyojin agreed, Richa let out a long sigh of relief. In the ninja school, although there was only a trace of the setting sun on the horizon, there were still many students diligently cultivating on the school field. In a training ground in the corner, Ningxi, who had been holding it in for the whole day, finally could not take it anymore. He asked Sasuke with a strange expression, "Sasuke, what's with the wound on your face?" Touching the scratches on his face, Sasuke said with a dark expression, "Cat scratched me." "Cat?" Sasuke quickly explained, "It's not an ordinary cat, it's a ninja cat." "Oh, I see." Pausing for a moment, Ningxi said, "Could the spiritual beast your family arrange for you be that ninja cat that scratched you?" Sasuke nodded weakly. Seeing that Sasuke wasn't in a good mood, Ningxi asked curiously, "What's wrong? Did the contract assessment not go smoothly?" Sasuke sighed, "Hey, don't mention it. Ninja cats are notoriously arrogant, bad-tempered, and not easy to tame. Even Shinichi, who has awakened the man GQ Sharingan, has to pay when using his spiritual beast Kasai. Therefore, the people of the Uchiha clan generally don't fight with ninja cats unless it's necessary. It's not that ninja cats aren't strong, but they are afraid of trouble." Sasuke was originally dissatisfied with the spiritual beast arranged for him by his family, so during the contract assessment, he showed his emotions on his face. The ninja cat didn't want to spoil him and taught him a lesson on the spot, then ran away happily. So yesterday, not only did Sasuke not get a spiritual beast, but his face was also scratched by the ninja cat. After teasing Sasuke, Ningxi packed up his ninja equipment. Going back so early? Today it's Sasuke's turn to be confused. In the face of Sasuke's competitor, Ningxi didn't hide anything. Sensei fought for a chance to enter Mount Mayaboku for me, so I can't train too late these days. Sasuke's eyes suddenly became cold. What? A chance to enter Mount Mayaboku? Ningxi nodded lightly. Sasuke blurted out, "Can I go?" Ningxi looked at Sasuke with some surprise. He didn't expect that with Sasuke's pride, he would make such a request, then shook his head. "I'm sorry. I can't make the decision on this matter." Sasuke looked at Ningxi with envy and said, "No, I was too presumptuous." Back home in the evening, Sasuke mentioned to his father Fuyue about Ningxi going to Mount Mayaboku and tentatively asked, "Father, can I go with you?" Knowing that Hyojin fought for a chance to enter Mount Mayaboku for Ningxi, Fuyue was also very surprised. As the patriarch of the Uchiha clan and the commander of the Mai police force, Fuyue naturally knows a lot of secrets that ordinary people don't know. In fact, there are many people in the village who want to enter Mount Mayaboku through Jiraiya. As far as Fuyue knows, Danzo once had a big fight with Jiraiya because of this matter, but in the end, the matter was left unsettled. Therefore, Fuyue was very surprised that Hyojin could win against Jiraiya. Sasuke asked again, "Father, can you fight for this chance for me?" Seeing Sasuke's earnest gaze, Fuyue slowly nodded. 2 days later, having received Jiraiya's notice, Hyojin led Ningxi and Hinata to the appointed place. Not long after, Fuyue also led Sasuke over. Hyojin muttered in a low voice, "Huh, why are they here too?" Seeing Sasuke walking over from afar, Ningxi was also startled for a moment, and then took the initiative to say to Hyojin, "Teacher, I was the one who told Sasuke about going to Mount Mayaboku." Hyojin smiled. "You told him. Aren't you afraid that you'll have another competitor?" Ningxi's eyes were clear as he replied, "I'm not afraid." Hyojin smiled and didn't say anything else. With the current complicated situation in the village, in order to appease the Uchiha clan, which was becoming more and more restless, Hyojin suspected that even if the Uchiha clan didn't know about it beforehand, 3 generations Naruto would have deliberately leaked this information to the Uchiha clan in some way, so that the Uchiha clan would owe Naruto's faction a favor. After all, the door had already been opened, so bringing 2 or 3 would still be the same. Adding one more Sasuke wouldn't be a loss to Jiraiya, but could appease the Uchiha clan and improve the village's stability. 3 generations would definitely do such a deal. Moreover, everyone had seen Sasuke's excellence. 3 generations most likely still wanted to absorb Sasuke into Naruto's faction and further win over the Uchiha clan. The appearance of Fuyue and Sasuke here was the evidence. Soon, Jiraiya also arrived. Looking at the 3 children, Jiraiya said to Hyojin and Fuyue, "I'll bring them back safely, but whether they can get what they want or not depends on them." Hyojin and Fuyue nodded together. After watching Jiraiya leave with the 3 children, Fuyue turned to Hyojin and said, "I owe you a favor this time." Fuyue was very clear that it was thanks to Hyojin that Sasuke could have such an opportunity. Hyojin lightly said, "Let's talk about it after we get the result." Mount Mayaboku. Jiraiya led Ningxi, Hinata, and Sasuke to the front of the Great Toad Immortal, then sat cross-legged on one side and said, "Great Immortal, these 3 children are the village's outstanding juniors. Take a look." Looking at the incomparably huge toad in front of them, the 3 children were a little embarrassed. Hinata even subconsciously grabbed Ningxi's sleeve. The half-asleep Great Toad Immortal's eyes swept across Ningxi and Hinata one by one without stopping. But when his eyes swept across Sasuke, his eyes suddenly flashed. Second update. Chapter 709. As soon as he saw Sasuke, Great Toad Sage's half-closed eyes suddenly opened, and an inexplicable light flashed in his already cloudy eyes. There is no doubt that Great Toad Sage has the ability to predict the future to a certain extent. At that time, Great Toad Sage must have seen some kind of trend in the future and understood that only Yukari and Hamura, who shared Kagaya's huge power, can resist the cruel rule of Kagaya, who has reached the realm of Kekkei Jinkainet. So he approached and lured Yukari to Yukari. Moreover, the reason why he gave Yukari the secret treasure of Mount Mayaboku that can resurrect the dead to Yukari in advance is probably because he foresaw that Hamura would die in Yukari's hands at the beginning of the final battle. He didn't point this out, causing Yukari to be on guard in advance. It was most likely because in the future that he saw, Hamura had to die by Yukari's hand, so that the great grief would stimulate Yukari, causing her eyes to mutate from Byakugan to Sharingan, or even Rinnegan. Only then would she have the ability to fight against her mother Kagaya. Similarly, driving Jiraiya to search for the child of prophecy all over the shinobi world is also a powerful manifestation of Great Toad Sage's ability to predict the future. Therefore, when Great Toad Sage's eyes fell on Sasuke, he immediately realized that Sasuke is the reincarnation of Indra Otsutsuki, the son of the sage of the Six Paths, Yukari. After all, Indra and Azura are brothers who have been disturbing the shinobi world for hundreds of years, so Great Toad Sage couldn't be more familiar with them. At the same time, the Great Toad Immortal also saw some fragmented and vague fragments of the future from Sasuke's body and understood that Sasuke might play an important role in the upcoming Millennium Revolution. Jiraiya was also surprised to see Great Toad Sage suddenly open his eyes, because in his impression, Great Toad Sage has always been sleepy. Jiraiya got up and asked, "Great Toad Sage, how are these children?" Great Toad Immortal chuckled and slowly said, "They are all excellent juniors. Take them to see Fukasaku and let him test them." Jiraiya nodded, then led Ningxi, Hinata, and Sasuke to find Fukasaku Sage. Immortal Fukasaku walked around the three children and carefully examined them. After thinking for a while, he said, "How about this? I'll teach you Mount Myoki's immortal art. Whoever can successfully cultivate it will pass the test." Immortal technique? Hearing that Immortal Fukasaku was going to teach them immortal techniques, the three children immediately became spirited, and Sasuke rubbed his palms together. Jiraiya also said, "Immortal arts aren't that easy to cultivate." Sasuke pouted and said, "If Naruto can learn it, so can I." Jiraiya smiled. Naruto's mastery of immortal techniques caused many people in the village to have some misunderstandings about immortal techniques. They felt that if a 10-year-old brat could learn them, immortal techniques wouldn't be difficult. But in fact, even in the entire shinobi world, only a handful of ninjas possessed the aptitude to master immortal jutsu. Even Jiraiya himself needed the help of the two sage toads to smoothly enter sage mode. The only one in my village who could instantly enter sage mode with his own strength was Naruto, the first generation. Not long after, Immortal Fukasaku brought the three children to the toad pond. Looking at the lifelike toad statues piled up by the pond, Hinata asked timidly, "Immortal Fukasaku, why are there so many toad statues here?" "Hey, they aren't statues. They are ninjas who failed to practice immortal techniques." After a pause, Immortal Fukasaku said in a serious tone, "Practicing our Mount Mayaboku's immortal technique will cause the body of the cultivator to show some characteristics of toads, and during this process, once the natural energy in the body goes out of control, the cultivator will completely turn into a toad, and their body will gradually petrify, turning into a statue." "What?" Looking at the toad statues piled up by the pond, imagining that these statues used to be living people, the three children were scared to death. Jiraiya smiled and said, "Now you know how difficult it is to practice immortal techniques." Immortal Fukasaku said, "You don't have to worry too much. The reason why these people turn into statues is because they were too greedy and too rash. As long as they take it step by step, even if they can't learn immortal techniques, they won't turn into toad statues." Sasuke heaved a sigh of relief. then thought of something and asked, "Immortal, if we successfully learn immortal techniques, will we also turn into toads when we use immortal techniques?" Ningxi and Hinata also looked at Fukasaku. No one wanted to turn into a toad. Immortal Fukasaku naturally understood what the children were worried about, so he immediately smiled and said, "Don't worry. If you practice our Mount Mayaboku's immortal technique, your body will show some characteristics of a toad, but you won't really turn into a toad. Moreover, when your control over natural energy increases in the future, the characteristics of toads will gradually decrease." The amount of changes in one's body, in fact, also showed the degree of mastery of immortal techniques. When the first generation entered immortal mode, his body changed the least. Only some eyeshadow lines appeared on his face. And in the original space-time, Naruto's degree of mastery of immortal techniques was also very high. When he entered immortal mode, only his pupils became horizontal like those of a toad. In comparison, Jiraiya's control over natural energy was obviously inferior. After he entered immortal mode, not only did a large area of eyeshadow lines appear on his face, but his face, hands, and feet also showed different degrees of changes that were similar to toads. As for Dooku in the original space-time, because he had already undergone a large-scale transformation of his body before practicing the Ryuchi Cave immortal technique, and he had also savagely absorbed the flesh and blood of Orochimaru, his appearance in immortal mode was a special case, and it didn't have any reference value. Soon, immortal Fukasaku gently put a drop of toad oil on the arms of the three children and said, "Okay, you can now start meditating and feel the natural energy." Ningxi looked at the toad oil on his arm and asked, "Immortal, what is this?" "This is called toad oil. It can help you feel the natural energy in the air better." After a pause, immortal Fukasaku continued to explain, "Those ninjas who turned into toad statues were too greedy and used too much toad oil, allowing too much natural energy to rush into their bodies all at once. In the end, it caused them to lose control." Ningxi's heart skipped a beat, and he nodded repeatedly. "I understand." With the silent warning of a large number of toad statues, even Ningxi and Sasuke, who were eager to learn immortal techniques, subconsciously suppressed their impatience and silently felt the natural energy attracted by the toad oil on their arms. Chapter 1 offered. Chapter 7:10. As the nature energy surged into their bodies, Ningxi, Hinata, and Sasuke's bodies began to show various characteristics of toads. Some had small bumps on their skin, some had web-like membranes growing between their fingers, and some had pupils that had become horizontal like toads. Immortal Fukasaku and Jiraiya were not surprised by this, since this was a necessary process to cultivate Mount Mayaboku's celestial technique. Cultivating a celestial technique was, in fact, a circular process of comprehending the nature energy between heaven and earth, absorbing the nature energy, and integrating it. The advantage of cultivating a celestial technique in the three great holy lands was that the cultivator could use various tricks to forcibly comprehend the nature energy and absorb a certain amount of nature energy. The toad oil that immortal Fukasaku applied on the three children's arms was one of the tricks Mount Mayaboku used to cultivate a celestial technique. Once a person's body was smeared with the toad oil, regardless of their talent, they would be able to sense the nature energy in the air for a certain period of time. Through the toad oil, they would be able to forcefully absorb a portion of the nature energy into their body, completing the first two steps of cultivating a celestial technique: perception and absorption. However, the most difficult part of cultivating a celestial technique was not the first two steps of perception and absorption, but the third and final step of integration. Only by integrating the nature energy absorbed into one's body with one's chakra and digesting the nature energy could one be considered to have truly mastered the celestial technique. After a while, the three children sitting cross-legged by the toad pond had more and more toad characteristics on their bodies, and they were becoming more and more obvious. Upon seeing this, immortal Fukasaku shook his head at Jiraiya. Sigh. Jiraiya sighed. The increasing toad characteristics on their bodies meant that the three children were unable to integrate the nature energy absorbed into their bodies. Due to this reason, as the nature energy accumulated in their bodies became more and more like toads. Although the failure of the first attempt did not mean that the three children had no talent in cultivating immortal techniques, it at least showed that their talent in cultivating immortal techniques was far inferior to Naruto's. At this time, Immortal Fukusaku quickly wiped off the toad oil on the three children's arms, forcibly interrupting the process of the three children absorbing natural energy. As the toad oil was wiped off, the characteristics of the toads on the three children's bodies gradually faded, and they slowly returned to their normal appearance. Opening his eyes, Sasuke asked, "What's going on? Why can't I feel the nature energy anymore?" Ningxi and Hinata also opened their eyes and looked at Immortal Fukusaku and Jiraiya in confusion. Immortal Fukusaku said with some regret, "You have failed." Failed? Startled, Sasuke stood up abruptly. "I haven't even felt it yet. Why did I suddenly fail?" Ningxi's face was also filled with unwillingness. He couldn't accept such an inexplicable failure. Compared to the agitated Sasuke and Ningxi, Hinata's state of mind was much calmer. However, there was still a trace of disappointment in her eyes. This was because deep in her heart, she actually hoped that she could master immortal techniques like Naruto. This was not because she craved power, but because she wanted to have a common topic with Naruto. Obviously, the three children who were immersed in sensing the nature energy were not aware of the changes in their bodies, so they did not realize that danger was approaching. If it were not for Immortal Fukusaku watching over them, they might have become those toad statues at the edge of the toad pond in another 5 or 6 minutes. Looking at the expressions on the three children's faces, Jiraiya understood their feelings and said, "You don't have to be too upset. Your first attempt did not succeed, but it does not mean that you have lost the chance to master immortal techniques forever. In fact, letting you try to practice immortal techniques at this age is a bit too much in itself." To practice immortal techniques, other conditions were not to be mentioned for the time being. The most basic point was to have a huge amount of chakra. If a ninja did not have a huge amount of chakra in their body, then it would be completely impossible to fuse and absorb the nature energy in their body. Therefore, a certain degree of chakra's amount was the basic threshold for practicing immortal techniques. Although Ningxi, Hinata, and Sasuke were all Dojutsu Kekkei Genkai ninjas and had talent far beyond that of ordinary ninjas, but due to their age, the amount of chakra in their body was limited. Therefore, when trying to fuse and absorb the nature energy in their body, compared with adults, they not only had no advantage, but also had a clear disadvantage. Sasuke was not convinced and asked, "Then why can Naruto succeed?" Jiraiya explained, "Naruto's mother is from the Uzumaki clan, so Naruto also has the bloodline of the Uzumaki clan, and the Uzumaki clan is famous for its huge chakra's amount and amazing vitality. So in terms of practicing immortal techniques, Naruto has an advantage over you." There was another point that Jiraiya did not say. That is, the more ambitious one was, the more unfavorable it was for practicing immortal techniques. To put it bluntly, practicing immortal techniques was a process of understanding nature and using nature. When Naruto was in the Ryuchi cave, he didn't understand immortal techniques at all, and he didn't have a strong ambition. He just followed his instinct to feel nature. So it just happened that he had the mentality to practice immortal techniques, and he accidentally mastered immortal techniques. But Ningxi, Hinata, and Sasuke understood the power of immortal techniques, and they were even more aware of the value of the opportunity to enter Mount Myaboku. Therefore, their ambition to master immortal techniques was too strong, and they were somewhat worried about gains and losses, so their mentality was not suitable for practicing immortal techniques. Immortal Fukusaku took over and said, "The aptitude to practice immortal techniques is not the same thing as the aptitude of you ninjas. Excellent ninjas may not be able to master immortal techniques. Among the generations of Mise Naruto, only the first generation completely mastered immortal techniques. The second generation and the third generation were not able to master immortal techniques, and the fourth generation was too late to learn immortal techniques, so they were only able to learn immortal techniques before they died. Sasuke said unwillingly, "Immortal, can we try again?" Immortal Fukasaku immediately shook his head. "That won't do. Right now, your bodies have accumulated quite a lot of nature energy. If you continue to try, the nature energy in your bodies will corrode your bodies or even go out of control and turn you into these stone statues." Thinking about wasting the precious opportunity his teacher fought for, Ningxi couldn't accept it, so he said, "Immortal, I'm willing to take the risk and try again." At this time, Jiraiya stood up and said, "I promised your teacher and family that I would bring you back safely." Immortal Fukasaku smiled and said, "I didn't think it through. I shouldn't have used immortal techniques as a test. How about this? You came to Mount Mayaboku to sign a spiritual contract, so let's use the spiritual contract as a test." Then, Immortal Fukasaku summoned a large scroll and spread it in front of the three children. Then, he pointed at Sasuke, who was standing at the end, and said, "You first." Second update. Chapter 711. Looking at the contract scroll that Immortal Fukasaku had spread out on the ground, the three children, who had been traumatized by their failure in cultivating the immortal technique, immediately regained their spirits and looked over eagerly. Immortal Fukasaku pointed at Sasuke. "You first." Yes. Sasuke's face was full of excitement as he quickly walked to the contract scroll. Ningxi and Hinata did not pay much attention to it. They only looked nervously at Sasuke, who was undergoing the contract test. Because there were three of them, it was normal for there to be a difference in order. When he arrived in front of the contract scroll, Sasuke lowered his head and looked at it carefully. The contract scroll in front of him was about the size of his head. There was a long list of names written in blood. The second last name at the end was Jiraiya, who had brought them to Mount Mayaboku. After Jiraiya, the name at the end of the scroll was Minato. Immortal Fukasaku pointed the empty space behind Minato and said, "Use your own blood to write your name on it." Sasuke nodded. Then, without hesitation, he bit his finger and wrote the words Uchiha Sasuke in the empty space behind Minato's name. Then, he dipped his fingers in blood and pressed a five-fingered handprint under his name. Immortal Fukasaku nodded in satisfaction and said with a smile, "The sequence of hand seals for the psychic technique is Hai, Su, Yu, Shun Wei. Try it. If you succeed in the psychic technique, you will pass the test." Jiraiya added, "Sasuke, use all your strength." "Sasuke, do your best." Ningxi and Hinata also cheered for Sasuke. Sasuke took a deep breath and gathered all the chakra in his body. He slowly formed hand seals and shouted, "Psychic technique." Bang! In an instant, a huge cloud of white smoke rose and filled the surroundings. After the white smoke gradually dissipated, Ningxi and Hinata discovered that Sasuke, who was just in front of them, had disappeared. In his place was an incomparably huge toad. The size of this toad was in no way inferior to Naruto's spiritual beast, Xinya. Its entire body was dark red, and it had a long tobacco pipe in its mouth. There was also a huge dagger hanging on its waist. This was the first time Ningxi and Hinata had seen such a huge toad, and they were immediately dumbfounded. Wow! At this moment, Sasuke's exclamation came from above. Ningxi and Hinata looked up at the same time, only to realize that Sasuke, who had disappeared, was now on the head of this incomparably huge toad. Jiraiya raised the corner of his mouth. "I didn't expect that this kid, Sasuke, would be able to channel Buntai's spirit on his first try." Immortal Fukasaku smiled and said, "This kid isn't simple." At this moment, Buntai's eyes turned upwards and glanced at Sasuke, who was shouting on top of his head. He said with some displeasure, "Hey kid, stop shouting." Suppressing the excitement in his heart, Sasuke hurriedly bowed to Buntai and said politely, "My name is Uchiha Sasuke. I was the one who channeled your spirit here." The kid from Uchiha's family. Mumbling, Buntai instructed, "In the future, if there's nothing urgent, don't simply channel my spirit. Do you understand, kid?" "Yes, yes, yes." Sasuke, who looked happy, nodded repeatedly. Although Buntai's tone was not very polite, the meaning of his words was clear. He had already acknowledged the spiritual contract between him and Sasuke. In other words, he had already agreed to become Sasuke's spiritual beast. Thinking that he now had such a powerful spiritual beast, Sasuke hurriedly waved at Ningxi and Hinata, who were below him. "Ningxi, Hinata, I've succeeded. You guys have to work hard too." "That's great." Ningxi and Hinata were very excited at this moment. Both of them were happy for Sasuke's success and were also looking forward to their own contract assessment. This was because, judging from Sasuke's contract assessment, the contract assessment arranged by Immortal Fukasaku would be much easier than the assessment of cultivating immortal techniques. Moreover, once he signed a spiritual contract with the Toad of Mount Myaboku, he would be able to come to Mount Myaboku frequently in the future to try cultivating immortal techniques. Therefore, as long as he passed the contract assessment, not only would he obtain an extremely powerful spiritual beast, but he would also be able to continue trying to cultivate immortal techniques. It could be said that this was an assessment that could change one's fate. At this moment, Immortal Fukasaku instructed, "Buntai, you and Sasuke should go to other places and familiarize yourselves with each other first." "Okay." Buntai responded and then disappeared in front of everyone with a heavy leap. So powerful! Seeing that Buntai, who had such a huge body, was moving abnormally fast and nimbly, Ningxi could not help but exclaim in admiration. At the thought that he would soon obtain such a powerful spiritual beast, Ningxi's heart burned with passion. However, he did not forget about Hinata, who was beside him. Richa had already told him about the conflict that had occurred during the family meeting a few days ago. Therefore, he knew very well that it was his teacher, Hyojin, who had helped him fend off the censure from the ancestral family. He felt guilty for his lack of consideration during the actual combat drill, but he was also extremely grateful for his teacher's protection. Therefore, he took half a step back and said to Hinata, "Miss Hinata, you go first." Hinata said timidly, "Big brother Ningxi, it's better if you go first." Just as Ningxi and Hinata were modestly giving way to each other, Immortal Fukasaku arrived before the contract scroll and slowly rolled it up. This action did not only surprise Ningxi and Hinata, but even Jiraiya was puzzled. "Immortal Fukasaku, why did you put away the contract scroll? Ningxi and Hinata have not been assessed yet." Immortal Fukasaku explained regretfully, "Little Jiraiya, you should know that our Mount Myaboku will only accept one ninja in each generation. Since Sasuke has succeeded, then what?" Ningxi and Hinata were stunned when they heard that. They had not expected things to turn out this way. Jiraiya was stunned. He realized that what Immortal Fukasaku had said was indeed the truth. There was indeed only one ninja in each generation of Mount Myaboku. He was the only one in his generation, and Minato was the only one in his generation. In the original space and time, the next generation of Minato, Naruto, was also one person, and the next generation of Naruto, Maimaru, was also one person. At that moment, Ningxi came before Immortal Fukasaku and bowed deeply. "Immortal, please give me a chance. This opportunity to come to Mount Myaboku was fought for by my teacher. I do not want to disappoint him." Immortal Fukasaku said gently, "Child, this has always been the rule of Mount Myaboku." Ningxi wanted to say more, but Immortal Fukasaku shook his head and interrupted Ningxi. "Child, this is fate's arrangement." Ningxi looked confused. "Fate? Fate? Here's the first chapter." Chapter 712. Yes, it's fate. Jumping onto a stone platform, Fukasaku looked at Sasuke, who was getting familiar with Bunta in the distance, and said slowly, Sasuke was able to leave his name on the contract scroll and successfully communicate with Bunta. This is the guidance of fate. It's fate that chose him to become the shaman of Mount Mayaboku of this generation. Jiraiya, who was at the side, thought of his own experience and nodded unconsciously. Yes, it was because of an accident that I came to Mount Mayaboku. I think it's also fate's arrangement. Ningxi's expression was a bit gloomy as he asked, so, no matter how hard I try, there won't be any results? Fukasaku shook his head and jumped away. Jiraiya patted Ningxi's shoulder and said, You're still young. Hinata also came forward and comforted him. Ningxi Gij, although we don't have the fate to sign the contract in Mount Mayaboku, we still have the Byakugan and the soft fist. Ningxi looked at Sasuke, who was standing on the head of Bunta in the distance, while stroking the caged bird curse mark on his forehead, and muttered to himself, I'm just a bit unwilling. Why is fate always unwilling to look me in the eye? Listening to Ningxi's whisper, Jiraiya sighed softly. He felt that Ningxi, as a member of the Hyuga branch, had the fate of being controlled by the caged bird for his entire life. At the same time, he felt a headache as to how to explain this to Hyojin. This trip to Mount Mayaboku was proposed by Hyojin, and the reason why he agreed to Hyojin's request was to repay Hyojin for scaring away the Akatsuki members and saving the village. But he didn't expect that after the Uchiha clan got the news, they also came looking for him. According to Jiraiya's temperament, he naturally wouldn't agree, but in order to appease the restless Uchiha clan and maintain the stability of the village, the 3 generations forced him to agree to the request of the Uchiha clan, so he brought along Sasuke Uchiha. As a result, neither Hyuga Neji nor Hyuga Hinata were selected, but Uchiha Sasuke, who signed the summoning contract in Mount Mayaboku, was the one who signed the summoning contract, which made it difficult for him to explain to Kuroto. After pondering for a while, Jiraiya still couldn't come up with a good solution, so he shook his head and muttered to himself, Forget it, I'll just find another opportunity to repay Kuroto's merit. After long, Sasuke came back happily. Sasuke, congratulations. Sasuke-kun, congratulations. Ningxi and Hinata quickly put away the disappointment on their faces, forced a smile, and congratulated Sasuke. You two must not have thought that Bunta can spit out kerosene and is very good at fire and water release ninjutsu. It is a perfect match for our Uchiha clan. After a pause, Sasuke said proudly, Also, it can use the sword transform, and so on. It is not inferior to the powerful spiritual beast of Ryuchi Cave Shinya. Seeing that Sasuke wanted to say more, Jiraiya immediately interrupted him. Okay, let's talk about this later. Let's go back to the village first. Sasuke was startled and asked curiously, Go back to the village? Ningxi, Hinata hasn't participated in the assessment yet, right? Hey, where's immortal Fukasaku? Why is he missing? Jiraiya said, They don't have a chance anymore. Sasuke frowned and asked why. Jiraiya explained, The shaman of Mount Mayaboku can only be one in a generation. Since you succeeded in summoning Bunta, they won't have a chance anymore. What? Sasuke was shocked and immediately looked at Ningxi. Ningxi shook his head and said, I don't blame you. In the previous assessment, didn't Hinata and I also failed? Sasuke lowered his head and said, But this round of assessment, if you came first, maybe you would have been the one to sign the contract. Jiraiya said, Don't talk nonsense. You can successfully sign the contract in Mount Mayaboku. Is the arrangement of fate. This is both an honor and a responsibility. You have to shoulder the responsibility of protecting the peace of the shinobi world in the future. After Sasuke was recognized by Mount Mayaboku, Jiraiya naturally became closer to him and regarded him as one of his own. So whether it was his attitude or the tone of his speech, it was very different from before. Sasuke quickly replied, Yes, I know. Soon, Jiraiya returned to my village with Ningxi, Hinata, and Sasuke. After sending Ningxi and Hinata back to the Hyuga clan, Jiraiya left with Sasuke. In Hayashi's study room of the Hyuga clan's mansion, Hayashi, Richa, and Hyojin, who rushed over after hearing the news, called Ningxi and Hinata to the study room and asked them about the harvest of the trip to Mount Mayaboku. Feeling the concern of the family head, father, and teacher, Ningxi felt ashamed and said with a trembling voice, "I'm sorry, I couldn't sign the contract in Mount Mayaboku." Hinata also said timidly, "I'm sorry, I also couldn't sign the contract in Mount Mayaboku." Hayashi and Richa were immediately disappointed. Especially Hayashi. A trace of disappointment flashed in his eyes. Hinata first followed Naruto to the Ryuchi Cave, one of the 3 holy lands. Then he followed Ningxi to Mount Mayaboku. Both times, he didn't find anything. This undoubtedly showed that Hinata didn't have the talent to practice immortal techniques, and he didn't even have the opportunity to sign the contract in the Holy Land. On the other hand, Kuroto's reaction was much calmer, because when he saw that Sasuke was going to Mount Mayaboku with Niji and Hinata, he had a bad premonition in his heart. After pondering for a moment, Hyojin said to Ningxi, "Tell me everything about this trip in detail." Niji hurriedly told Kuroto everything that had happened to them on Mount Mayaboku, especially the process of the test to practice immortal techniques and the test to sign a contract. After hearing that Ningxi and Hinata only lost the opportunity because Sasuke signed the contract, Richa said with some annoyance, "Sigh, our luck this time is too bad." "Luck?" Hyojin snorted. Hayashi heard the mockery in Hyojin's tone and asked doubtfully, "What? Is there another reason?" Hyojin said lightly, "Those toads of Mount Mayaboku have some tricks up their sleeves, especially that great toad sage. He seems to have some kind of ability to predict the future. It should have found something on Sasuke and felt that Sasuke is more worthy of investment than Ningxi and Hinata, so it chose Sasuke." Hayashi's face sank. "You mean that Mount Mayaboku didn't choose Hinata and Ningxi because it looks down on our Hyuga clan?" Ningxi also froze for a moment and asked, "Sensei, isn't this the arrangement of fate? It's just a group of toads who bet in advance by relying on their special ability." After a pause, Hyojin said in a mocking tone, "Fate? Humph! This group of snobs really knows how to package themselves." Second update. Chapter 713. After listening to Hyojin's words, Hayashi, as the head of the Hyuga clan, immediately became gloomy. This time, Ningxi, Hinata, and Sasuke's trip to Mount Mayaboku was undoubtedly another crushing defeat of the Hyuga clan in front of the Uchiha clan. Now, whether it is in terms of family prestige or overall strength, the Uchiha clan has firmly suppressed the Hyuga clan. Even in ninja school, Sasuke Uchiha also suppressed Hinata and Ningxi. It can be said that in the competition between the two clans in recent years, in addition to the competition for the position of the headmaster of the ninja school, Hyojin defeated Uchiha Jishue and slightly recovered a game for the Hyuga clan. In other aspects, the Hyuga clan was almost completely defeated, falling behind the Uchiha clan in all aspects, and even the status of the Uchiha clan is faintly unstable. And with the signing of the psychic contract between Uchiha Sasuke and Mount Mayaboku, one of the 3 holy lands, it can be foreseen that the gap between the two clans will be further widened in the future. Faced with such a dilemma, the head of the Hyuga clan, Hayashi, was angry and annoyed. At this time, Richa glanced at the restless Ningxi and said, "Since the other party looks down on our Hyuga clan, there is no need for us to pester them anymore." Hyojin stood up and said in a casual tone, "Well, it's not a big deal." Sigh. Seeing that things have reached this point, Hayashi could only sigh. The Hyuga clan may still have some influence in my village, but against Mount Mayaboku, one of the 3 holy lands, they really can't do anything about it. After leaving the ancestral residence, Hyojin didn't walk far before Ningxi caught up to him. He followed behind Hyojin with a heavy heart, wanting to say something but hesitating. Seeing Ningxi's expression, Hyojin smiled. "Just say what you want to say. Why are you hesitating?" Ningxi asked, "Teacher, can the great toad immortal of Mount Miaomu really foresee the future? Can it really see the future?" Hyojin nodded lightly. Ningxi's expression darkened, and he asked in a low voice, if the great toad immortal of Mount Myaboku chose Sasuke because he foresaw Sasuke's future, then doesn't that mean that my future is inferior to Sasuke's? After learning that the great toad immortal's choice was related to the future, Ningxi had been thinking about this question. You're just too thoughtful. With a smile, Hyojin explained, the great toad immortal's foresight is not necessarily accurate. Since the great toad immortal hurriedly arranged for Jiraiya to search for the child of prophecy before Naruto's birth, it can be seen that the great toad immortal's prophecy is only a vague judgment of the future, or perhaps he has glimpsed some scattered fragments of the future, but he can't really control the future. Moreover, the ability of prophecy is not unique to the great toad immortal. The Miko-sama of the Land of Demons also has a magical ability of prophecy. Not to mention an adult Miko-sama. Even the young Zun can prophesy of death and inadvertently see the future of some people. Ningxi said, but the fact that the Great Toad Immortal chose Sasuke means that Sasuke's future will be more dazzling than mine. The corner of Hyojin's mouth rose, and he chuckled. That may not be the case. In fact, there's one thing that Hyojin didn't tell Ningxi, and that is because of him, the Great Toad Immortal may not be able to see the future of Ningxi at all. When he was in the Land of Demons, Miko-sama clearly mentioned to Hyojin that because of the dragon vein, she couldn't see any prophecy related to Hyojin. In other words, as the Jinchuriki of the dragon vein, Hyojin has the ability to shield himself from all prophecies. Because the so-called prophecy is actually just a high-level use of nature energy, and if you look at it carefully, it can be regarded as a kind of sage technique. The nature energy contained in the dragon vein is too rich and huge, so when Hyojin carries it with him, it is equivalent to fusing with nature. Any prophecy about Hyojin will be regarded as a prophecy about the entire nature, thus causing the prophecy to be invalid. This is also why the Great Toad Immortal was able to predict some scattered scenes of Hyojin in the early days, such as the sky-blue eyes and other information. But after Hyojin became the Jinchuriki of the Dragon Vein, the Great Toad Immortal was no longer able to see any future scenes related to Hyojin. And as Hyojin's disciple, Ningxi's fate has long been linked with Hyojin's. When the Great Toad Immortal tried to see Ningxi's fate, Hyojin was bound to be involved. Therefore, in the Great Toad Immortal's eyes, Ningxi is nothing special. Ningxi sadly said, Teacher, you don't need to comfort me. Even if my future with Sasuke was uncertain before, after this trip to Mount Myaboku, that uncertainty should no longer exist. Hyojin glanced at Ningxi and didn't say anything. Ningxi continued, after Sasuke signed the spiritual contract with Mount Myaboku, not only did he obtain the powerful spiritual beast of Mount Myaboku, he can also enter Mount Myaboku at any time and try to learn Mount Myaboku's immortal technique. Plus, his talent isn't any worse than mine, so our fates have been decided. The Great Toad Immortal's choice might not be wrong. Ningxi has thoroughly experienced the terror of immortal technique in actual combat. Naruto, who was at the bottom of the school's taijutsu assessment, as soon as he enters Sage Mode, he had a powerful strength that could almost suppress a Jonin, which shows that the improvement of strength of Sage arts completely exceeds the limit of Kekkei Genkai. This time, Sasuke successfully signed the spiritual contract with Mount Myaboku, which is equivalent to obtaining the possibility of continuing to practice immortal technique. And Ningxi is very clear that Sasuke's comprehensive strength is already above his. If Sasuke also mastered immortal technique and has the help of Mount Myaboku's powerful spiritual beast, then it will be almost impossible for him to surpass Sasuke. This has nothing to do with effort. It is completely fate. Hyojin said with a smile, What? Have you accepted your fate? I just can't see the hope of surpassing them. Naruto has immortal technique and the inheritance of Ryuchi Cave. Sasuke has Sharingan and the inheritance of Mount Myaboku. Although I have Byakugan, it's just a pair of Byakugan caged in a cage. Teacher, I really can't see the future, Niji said slowly. His eyes were not as bright as they used to be. Hyojin didn't interrupt. After Ningxi poured out his heart, he asked slowly, Mount Mayaboku, Ryuchi Cave, and so on, are they very strong? First update. Chapter 714. Ningxi didn't know how to answer Hyojin's sudden question. In his opinion, his teacher should know better than anyone else what the three Holy Lands meant. Therefore, he didn't understand why his teacher would ask such a question. Before Ningxi could think of an answer, Hyojin asked casually, Are Orochi, Sinya, and Bunta Toad very strong? This. Stunned again, Ningxi said hurriedly, Teacher, you might not have seen Naruto's spiritual beast, Sinya, and Sasuke's spiritual beast, Bunta Toad. They're really powerful spiritual beasts. Ningxi knew clearly that Hyojin had only arrived at the scene after Sinya had left the previous battle drill. Therefore, he guessed that Hyojin hadn't seen Naruto's spiritual beast or Bunta Toad from Mount Mayaboku. Otherwise, he felt that his teacher wouldn't have asked such an obvious question. Hyojin smiled and looked at the horizon. It was already evening. The setting sun was setting in the west, leaving only a faint afterglow. On the other side of the sky, the bright moon was faintly discernible in the sky. Looking at the faintly discernible moon in the sky, Hyojin said calmly, Be it Mount Mayaboku or Ryuchi Cave, they are just dispensable aids. Ningxi was puzzled. Dispensable? At this moment, there was a commotion on the street in the distance. Ningxi looked over and saw a large group of students from the ninja school walking towards him. The ones leading the group were none other than Naruto and Sasuke. Shikamaru, Xiaoli, Ino, Sakura, and the rest of the students were following behind Naruto and Sasuke in a chaotic manner. They were arguing about something and looked very excited. Soon, the students arrived in front of Hyojin. Hello, Principal. The noise stopped abruptly, and all the students respectfully bowed towards Hyojin. Hyojin asked casually, What are you guys doing? Sasuke quickly said, Headmaster, I want to challenge Naruto today. The corners of Hyojin's mouth curled up when he heard that. He thought to himself, Sasuke thinks he's capable again. Sasuke had just signed a Spirit Link contract at Mount Mayaboku during the day, and now he was anxiously looking for Naruto in the evening. It could be seen that Naruto had really provoked Sasuke quite a bit these past few days. Naruto held the back of his head with his hands and looked indifferent. He didn't seem to take Sasuke's challenge seriously. Seeing Naruto's appearance, Sasuke snorted coldly and said, Humph, you'll see what happens today. Naruto curled his lips and said, Who's afraid of who? The other students were either supporting Naruto or Sasuke, and it immediately became noisy again. Hyojin smiled playfully and said, The school didn't forbid you guys from exchanging pointers. Why did such a large group of people come looking for me on the streets? Sasuke hurriedly bowed towards Hyojin and said, The school's practice field is too small, and we can't display our skills. Headmaster, please allow us to go outside the village to exchange pointers. If the students wanted to leave the village and exchange pointers outside the village, they had to get permission from the headmaster, Hyojin. Therefore, Sasuke and the others came looking for Hyojin. Hyojin waved his hand and said, I knew it would be like this. Go, but don't go too far. Hyojin had already discovered that Kakashi, Jishue, and even Itachi were following this group of children in the dark. Therefore, he casually waved his hand and agreed to Sasuke's request. Sasuke's face lit up, and his gaze shifted to Ningxi, who was standing beside Hyojin. He said, Ningxi, you come along as well. Me? I think I'll pass. Hearing that Sasuke and Naruto wanted to exchange pointers outside the village, Ningxi understood that they would definitely use powerful spiritual beasts. Therefore, he didn't give it much thought and rejected them. He was clear that he had already been left behind by Naruto and Sasuke. He no longer had the qualifications to exchange pointers with them. Naruto asked curiously why. Sasuke also stared at Ningxi with some doubts. Just as Ningxi was about to find an excuse to reject it, he suddenly realized that Naruto and Sasuke weren't inviting him to exchange pointers with them. Instead, they were simply asking him to observe the exchange, just like the group of students following behind him. Knowing that he had misunderstood them, Ningxi was shrouded by an immense sense of awkwardness and bitterness. Before the actual combat drill, he was one of the top students among his batch. Even Sasuke, who was the strongest among his batch, would be extremely cautious when he invited him to exchange pointers. But now, Sasuke no longer had the intention to invite him to exchange pointers. Just as Ningxi was at a loss for words, Hyojin said, "You guys go ahead first. I still have something to tell Ningxi." Naruto and Sasuke didn't suspect anything. They led a large group of students to the village gate excitedly. After his batch had gone far away, Ningxi sighed faintly and then said to Hyojin gratefully, "Teacher, it's all thanks to you just now. Otherwise, I would have made a fool of myself." Hyojin smiled and said, "I'm not trying to help you out. I do have something to tell you. Come with me." Swish! With that said, Suijin grabbed Niji's shoulder, and with a flicker, he disappeared from the spot. After a few leaps, Hyojin directly crossed the outer wall of the village and took Ningxi to an open space outside the village. Ningxi looked around and exclaimed, so fast." He had always known that his teacher's speed was very fast. However, it was only at this moment that he personally felt how fast his teacher's teleportation technique was. In just a blink of an eye, he had already arrived outside the village. Hyojin asked, "Ningxi, do you really want a spiritual beast?" Recalling the scene earlier, Ningxi nodded heavily. I really want to have a real spar with Sasuke, Naruto, and the others. But I don't want you to beg others for me anymore." Hyojin bit his finger and slowly formed a seal while saying, "We don't beg others." He recognized the sequence of Kuroto's hand seals. It was the Hai, Su, Yu, Shun, and Way of the art of spiritual communication. Ninku exclaimed, "Teacher, you also have a spiritual beast?" Hyojin's lips curled up, and he shouted softly, "Spiritual beast!" Bang! In an instant, a huge gust of white smoke surged out and enveloped the surroundings. The evening light was dim to begin with, and the afterglow of the setting sun had already fallen to the horizon. Therefore, as the huge gust of white smoke surged out, the surroundings instantly turned dark. After the white smoke gradually dissipated, the dimmed light did not return. This was because at the place where the white smoke was surging, a huge object the size of a mountain was revealed. It blocked the setting sun on the horizon, dragging out a long shadow. Standing under this huge shadow, Niji raised his head with a dumbfounded expression on his face. Here comes the second update. Chapter 7:15. Because he was standing against the setting sun, Ningxi, who was standing in the shadow, could not see the huge creature in front of him clearly. However, his instincts told him that it was a very powerful pressure. It was a pressure that was not inferior to that of Orochi and Bunta. "It's so big." After recovering from the shock, Niji quickly activated the white eye and carefully sized up the man. It was only then that he saw the huge creature in front of him clearly. It was a wild boar with a pair of sharp fangs, a messy mane, and many old scars on its body. Wild boar. Ningxi was stunned on the spot, and he did not know what to do. The wild boar lowered its head and breathed out hot air from its nostrils as it lazily glanced at Ningxi. Ugh! At this time, compared to the wild boar that was as big as a mountain, Ningxi was as small as an ant. Therefore, he could not bear the huge pressure from the wild boar and subconsciously took a step back. After that, he realized that although the wild boar in front of him looked fierce, and one could tell that it was not someone to be trifled with, its eyes were filled with laziness and seemed to be at a loss. It gave people a feeling that it was not very smart. At the same time, he inexplicably felt that the wild boar was very close to him. Obviously, Ningxi was not the only one who was surprised. Hyojin, who was standing on the head of the wild boar, was also surprised. He said, "Tsk, it has already grown so big." Hyojin knew that the wild boar could grow. When he first encountered the little wild boar in the Forest of Death, the little wild boar was only as tall as Tenseigan's knee. But half a year later, the little wild boar became a tyrant in the Forest of Death, bullying the market and causing chaos in the Forest of Death. The village had no choice but to send Itachi's team to deal with it. At that time, the little wild boar had already grown to a height of 2 to 3 meters. After another half a year, when Hyojin used the water-release clone to fight against the Akatsuki, it was already able to tear apart a tiger with its mouth, and its body was almost the size of a small building. Now that he hasn't seen it for 3 or 4 years, Hyojin didn't expect that it would grow to the size of a hill. This growth speed is almost comparable to the ninja beasts of the 3 Holy Lands. Stamping his feet, Hyojin said, "Hey, don't tell me you don't understand what's going on." Only then did the wild boar realize that there was a person on its head. It was startled at first, but when it recognized that it was Hyojin, it jumped up intimately. Boom, boom, boom. As the wild boar leaped into the air, the earth shook and the mountains shook. Ningxi, who was on the ground, looked at the giant wild boar jumping up and down in horror. His body was also moving up and down along with the tremors of the ground, and his face was extremely pale. His thoughts were frozen, and he had no idea what was going on. All right, all right. After comforting the wild boar a little, Hyojin carefully glanced at the wild boar. Seeing that the wild boar was covered with scars, he understood that this guy has caused a lot of trouble and probably suffered a lot of beatings when he was in the shinobi world. However, Hyojin also keenly discovered that these scars are very old, and the most recent one seemed to be from 1 or 2 years ago. It seems that this wild boar hasn't been injured in the past 1 or 2 years, or it can be said that nothing can hurt it anymore. Immediately afterward, Hyojin quietly opened the Tenseigan. The moment the wild boar was summoned, Kuroto faintly noticed that something was wrong, because he felt that there was a huge and mottled Tenseigan chakra in the wild boar's body. With the opening of the Tenseigan, Hyojin quickly resonated with the mottled Tenseigan chakra in the wild boar's body. He casually picked it up and sucked a large amount of Tenseigan chakra from the wild boar's body. After looking at the Tenseigan chakra extracted from the wild boar's body for a while, Hyojin didn't know whether to laugh or cry. In order to synthesize the toxin, he carried out poison experiments again and again on this little wild boar with extremely high poison resistance in the Death Forest. Although he didn't hurt the little wild boar's life, in order to compensate it, Hyojin injected his own extremely pure Tenseigan chakra into the little wild boar's body under the Tenseigan chakra mode, which can be regarded as the little wild boar's hard work in testing the toxin. Contents of Chapter 80 above. Unexpectedly, it was Hyojin's casual action that year that not only allowed this talented little wild boar to open its meridians and become a ninja pig that can control chakra, but also mutated its chakra into Tenseigan chakra. Although its Tenseigan chakra is extremely mottled and the purity is very low, it can't be compared with Hyojin's. But even Hyojin can't deny that the wild boar's body is indeed a diluted Tenseigan chakra. No wonder this idiot grew so fast. It turned out to be fused with the Tenseigan chakra that I instilled into it. After returning the extracted Tenseigan chakra to the wild boar, Hyojin still felt that this matter is a bit strange. One must know that the quality of Tenseigan chakra is extremely high. To some extent, it even surpasses the Rinnegan chakra, because the ultimate Tenseigan chakra can condense truth-seeking ball, such as the Tenseigan chakra mode. Although the ultimate Rinnegan chakra is also amazing, it can't condense truth-seeking ball. Therefore, the difficulty of fusing Tenseigan chakra is definitely higher than fusing nature energy. The little wild boar can store the Tenseigan chakra that Hyojin instilled into its body, and over time, it gradually fused this Tenseigan chakra with its own chakra, successfully allowing its own chakra to obtain some of the characteristics of Tenseigan chakra. This is definitely a miracle in the field of probability. With a flash, Hyojin landed in front of Ningxi. After seeing Hyojin, the pale Ningxi quickly asked, "Teacher, this wild boar is your summoned beast?" Hyojin nodded. Glancing at the huge wild boar in front of him again, Ningxi wondered, but why have I never heard you mention it before? Hyojin naturally won't say that he has forgotten about this wild boar. He just smiled awkwardly. It's just a summoned beast. There's nothing worth publicizing. But this isn't an ordinary summoned beast. As Ningxi spoke, his gaze unconsciously shifted to the wild boar. Because of the Byakugan, he knew very well that the body of the ninja pig in front of him contained a huge chakra that was not inferior to Orochi and Bunta the Toad. Moreover, for some reason, he felt that the chakra in the body of this ninja pig was very close. There was an inexplicable feeling of the same origin, and it was a magical chakra that surpassed his Byakugan chakra. It was vaguely similar to the chakra in his teacher Hyojin's body. First update. Chapter 716. Looking at the huge wild boar in front of him, Ningxi suddenly thought of something and asked Hyojin, "Teacher, what's its name?" Hyojin was a little embarrassed. I don't think it has a name yet." "No name?" Stunned, Ningxi looked puzzled. "Teacher, your spiritual beast is so powerful. Why doesn't it have a name?" "That's too strange." Hyojin pointed at the huge wild boar. "Look at it. Does it look like it needs a name?" At that moment, the huge wild boar's face was filled with a fawning expression on Hyojin's face. Coupled with its huge size, it gave off an inexplicable feeling that it wasn't smart enough. Ningxi was a little troubled. "But I can't call it a wild boar, right? That's too disrespectful." "That's your problem," Yi Zichen said. Waving his hand, Hyojin said, "Come on. If you're willing, sign a spiritual contract with it." Ningxi hurriedly asked, "Teacher, don't I have to go through some tests? Will it agree?" Hyojin said casually, "You've already passed the test." Ningxi was a little puzzled. "I passed." Hyojin smiled. "Just like your trip to Mount Mayaboka this time. Whoever they say passes, that person passes. But for me, whoever I say passes, that person passes." Ningxi pondered. "Teacher, are you trying to tell me that there's no such thing as fate? There's only the arrangements of those who can make decisions?" Hyojin patted Ningxi's shoulder. "Yes, remember this. Fate is always in your own hands. Don't resign yourself to fate until you die." "Yes." Ningxi nodded heavily. After arranging for Ningxi to sign a spiritual contract with the wild boar, Hyojin turned around and instructed the wild boar, "Look carefully. He's my disciple. If he's communicating with you, don't slack off." Hum, 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 hum. The wild boar hurriedly knelt down, nodded its head, and stuck its long tusks into the ground, showing its respect to Hyojin. After completing the spirit contract, Ningxi's spirit was completely different. The depression that had enveloped him before was swept away, and his eyes regained their former vigor. While stroking the wild boar's thick tusks, he asked Hyojin, "Sensei, what ninjutsu is it good at?" "Ahem." After coughing twice, Hyojin said, "You'll have to figure out yourself." "Oh," Ningxi responded. Hyojin glanced at Ningxi, who was happily sizing up the wild boar, and said solemnly, "At your age, you should be focusing on honing your physical skills and chakra control. It's still too early for you to think about things like spiritual beasts." In the Sky Fortress, Hyojin had arranged for Gaara and Xiangli to train in the most basic physical skills and chakra control. From Hyojin's point of view, 10 years old was the age to solidify one's foundation. At this age, one should focus on honing one's physical skills and chakra control. Then, one should cultivate 1 or 2 ninjutsu that matched one's own chakra attribute, or explore one's own blood limit. Spiritual techniques required a large amount of chakra to support them. Other than Naruto's special physique, other children around the age of 10 would probably consume most of their own chakra during the process, even if they could summon powerful spiritual beasts. Therefore, for children of this age, spiritual beasts were a luxury that was too much of a burden. Ningxi explained, "Sensei," Hyojin waved his hand casually and said, "You don't have to explain to me. I know how it feels to be showered in the face by my peers." During his time at the ninja school, Hyojin was also stimulated by the genius Kakashi, so he was very clear about how Ningxi felt at the moment. There were one or two dazzling peers showing off in front of him every day, and his own efforts were not worth mentioning in front of them. Anyone would have a mental breakdown when faced with such a situation. Things like maintain one and don't be disturbed by external things were actually just empty words. Furthermore, when Ningxi was young, he had personally seen his father, Richa, being punished by the family head, Hayashi, with a caged bird curse seal. From that moment, in his young heart, he deeply understood the difference between the Hyuga clan's branch family and the main family. Because of that, he became especially sensitive and his pride was surprisingly strong. Hyojin continued, Naruto, I can give you everything that Sasuke and the others have. However, as your sensei, I must let you understand that you yourself are the root of everything. Be it ninjutsu or spiritual techniques. Although they are dazzling and fascinating, physical techniques and chakra control are the more important foundations. Don't be enchanted by other things and neglect the truly important things. Ningxi hid the pride on his face and bowed deeply to Hyojin. Sensei, I will remember this. I will definitely train harder in the future. Hyojin smiled. Although sensitivity and strong self-esteem have all kinds of disadvantages, there's also this advantage. That is, as long as you give a little guidance, Ningxi will execute it to the letter. Knowing that Ningxi was still thinking about the match between Naruto and Sasuke, Hyojin no longer talked nonsense and just said, I know you can't wait, go. Ningxi took a deep breath and said, Sensei, I will not lose to Naruto and Sasuke on the other side in the open space outside my village. Naruto and Sasuke confronted each other on the open space, while the other students who came to watch the fun hid far away and watched the battlefield nervously. And on a tree further away stood a group of jonin. If Hyojin was here, he would find that among this group of jonin, there were not only Kakashi, Jishue, and Itachi, but also Red Bean, who was responsible for Naruto's daily life, and Guy, Asuma, and Kurenai, who came to watch the fun. Asuma leaned on the tree trunk with his arms crossed and said, Jishue, don't blame me for pouring cold water on you. That kid Naruto is unreasonably strong, not to mention the other students. Even ordinary jonin would find it difficult to take him down without a sneak attack. That kid from Uchiha, is his brain fried? Isn't challenging Naruto to death? I say, aren't you worried at all? Itachi said, Asuma, sensei, please rest assured. If Sasuke is defeated, I will save him. I will not let the situation get out of control. You? Asuma glanced at Itachi with a trace of contempt in his eyes. Kuroto is indeed a little dissatisfied with Itachi. In his opinion, Itachi neither has any outstanding achievements, nor has he shown much strength, but relying on the power of the Uchiha clan, he has been promoted to a jonin, especially a jonin. Recently, he was directly promoted to a jonin, so he is very skeptical about whether Itachi, the eldest son of the Uchiha patriarch, has the strength of a jonin. Itachi didn't care about Asuma's attitude, but looked at Sasuke on the battlefield in the distance. Not far away, Tsunade stood on the crown of a big tree with one hand on her waist, looking at Sasuke in the distance, and asked Jiraiya next to her, this kid from Uchiha family, is he really recognized by the great Toad Sage? Jiraiya nodded solemnly. Second update. Chapter 717. I didn't expect that the great Toad Sage would choose the Uchiha clan. After a pause, Tsunade continued, I'm afraid you have to explain to Hyojin. He is not an easy guy to deal with. I heard that not long ago, he fought with the Hyuga clan at the Hyuga clan meeting, making the Hyuga clan very embarrassed. Jiraiya was taken aback. Is there such a thing? The Hyuga clan dared to fight with the Hyuga clan. This is a rare thing that hasn't happened for many years. So, although he doesn't care much about the internal struggles of these noble clans, Jiraiya was quite surprised to hear this news. Tsunade gently nodded. Well, not only that, I also heard that the Hyuga clan doesn't seem to have a good way to deal with him for a while. It can be seen that his prestige in the Hyuga clan is very high. so the Hyuga clan is somewhat afraid to take action against him. Jiraiya pondered for a moment and said, "This time I promise to take Hinata and Ningxi to Mount Mayaboku in order to reward him for his merits. Since the matter didn't get done, then I will find another opportunity to reward him." Tsunade smiled. "You don't have to be too embarrassed. If Kakashi can smoothly become a fifth Sama, Sensei may arrange a position for Hyojin as an advisory elder." "Ha! An advisory elder of the Hyuga clan? Don't you think it's very interesting?" Jiraiya frowned when he heard this. 3 generations, knowing that Hyojin is in conflict with the Hyuga clan, still intends to promote Hyojin as an advisory elder in the future. This undoubtedly wants to use Hyojin's identity as a Hyuga clan to check and balance the Hyuga clan, so that the Hyuga clan and the Hyuga clan can restrict each other, thus weakening the influence of the Hyuga clan on the village. Understanding this, Jiraiya quickly asked, "Has the old man decided?" Tsunade replied, "Not really. Teacher only has this intention. As for the specific arrangements, it will depend on the situation in the future. In short, Teacher won't throw the heavy responsibility of Naruto to Kakashi in the short term." Different from the original time and space, the current Kakashi, after learning that his best friend might still be alive and had gone astray, regained the determination to forge ahead like when he was a fledgling. Not only has he successfully mastered the Flying Thunder God technique of the 4 generations Naruto, but he is also actively practicing the Hashimen Tanku, and his strength is steadily advancing from elite Jonin to the Kage level. So Naruto's faction has begun to pave the way for his ascension. Jiraiya wasn't interested in the topic of power, so he quickly turned his attention to the empty space in the distance and asked, "Who do you think will win this spar?" Tsunade also looked into the distance and said, "Naruto." On the empty space, with both hands in his pockets, Sasuke said coldly, "Naruto, I admit that I have underestimated you before, but I have no intention of giving up the throne of first place in the same batch." Naruto rolled up his sleeves. What are you talking about? We'll know who is stronger after a spar." Sasuke shook his head. "If you weren't in the same batch as me, with your strength, it wouldn't be difficult for you to get first place in the same batch. But your luck is really too bad. What a pity. You arrogant fellow." With that, Naruto bit his finger and quickly formed a seal, shouting, "Psychic art!" Bang, accompanied by a wave of white smoke. The huge Shinya appeared on the empty space. Standing on the head of the huge snake Shinya, Naruto shouted at Sasuke, "Sasuke, didn't you say that you obtained a powerful psychic beast today? I don't believe that your psychic beast is stronger than my Shinya." The corner of Sasuke's lips curled up as he leisurely took out his hand from his pockets. As he formed a seal, he said in an imposing manner, "I'm sorry, but I'm going to take back the title of first place in the same batch today." Bang, another wave of white smoke surged, and when the smoke dissipated, a huge red toad appeared in everyone's vision. Therefore, on the empty space under the setting sun, 2 huge psychic beasts faced each other, while Naruto and Sasuke stood on the heads of these 2 huge psychic beasts. What? What huge toad? So Sasuke also has such a powerful psychic beast, as expected of Lord Sasuke. With Sakura and Ino in the lead, a group of Sasuke's fans instantly became agitated when they saw this huge toad that was similar in size to Shinya. In the students' simple understanding, a huge body was equivalent to a powerful being. Far away, Kakashi's gaze turned cold as he asked puzzledly, "Isn't this Lord Jiraiya's psychic beast? Since when did Sasuke sign a psychic contract with Mount Mayaboku?" As a disciple of 4 generations, Kakashi immediately recognized the huge toad that Sasuke had summoned. It was Jiraiya and his teacher, 4 generations, Naruto's psychic beast, Bunta the Toad. Asuma had a shocked expression. "It can't be. Aren't these kids too exaggerated these days?" After sighing, Red said to Jishue, "No wonder you weren't anxious at all. It turns out that Sasuke signed a psychic contract with Mount Mayaboku." Jishue smiled and explained, "That kid Sasuke just came back from Mount Mayaboku. That's why I only found out about it." Red Bean, who had been a little dispirited, instantly became excited. She smiled and said, "Hee hee, there's going to be a good show to watch." Swish, at this moment, Hyojin landed beside them. Asma greeted him. "Kuroto, you're here too." Itachi hurriedly said, "Senior, I'm really sorry about what happened at Mount Myaboku." Hyojin waved his hand and said, "Mount Myaboku has the right to choose. It has nothing to do with you." Hyojin has always been clear about gratitude and grudges. Mount Myaboku has the right to choose its own representative in the shinobi world, so even if they didn't give Hyojin face this time, Hyojin won't take the initiative to retaliate against them. But at the same time, if Mount Myaboku is attacked in the future, then don't expect Hyojin to lend a helping hand. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the open space in the distance. Naruto, who was on Shinya's head, and Sasuke, who was on Bunta's head, immediately noticed this figure. Sasuke shouted, "Ningtsi, you almost missed a good show." Ningtsi didn't retreat to the students in the distance. Instead, under everyone's gaze, he slowly walked to the center of the open space and said, "Count me in for this spar." Sasuke said with some difficulty, "Ningtsi, this spar between me and Naruto isn't like the playful ones in the school field. You better not participate." Naruto also said, "Ningtsi, you don't have a spiritual beast, so you'll be at a disadvantage in the spar." On the big tree in the distance, Tsunade suddenly straightened her body and looked puzzled. "What's going on? Is Ningtsi also participating in this spar?" Jiraiya muttered, "This little guy can't be agitated, right? No, I have to stop him. If he gets injured here, it'll be even harder to answer to Hyojin." Bang! Before Jiraiya could finish his sentence, white smoke surged from the open space in the distance. First update. Chapter 718. Looking at the huge creature under Ningxi's feet, Jiraiya's mouth twitched. Although, because the distance was too far, it was impossible to clearly perceive the chakra level of the summoning beast under Niji's feet. But based on the huge size of the summoning beast that was not inferior to Shinya and Buntai, it was easy to judge that even if the summoning beast that Niji had summoned was not comparable to Shinya and Buntai from the Three Holy Lands, it was by no means simple. Tsunade, who was at the side, snorted and said, "Humph, it seems like we have underestimated the Hyuga clan." On the other side of the tree, what the hell are all the students of this batch monsters? Looking at the scene before him, Asma was so shocked that he could not close his mouth. Previously, when he did not manage to take down Naruto in the actual combat drill, it had already made him, the son of Naruto, a little depressed. Now that he saw Sasuke and Ningtsi summoning powerful spiritual beasts that were comparable to Shinya, he was even a little dazed. He felt that everything in front of him was too fantastical and unreal. It was not the ninja world that he knew at all. Guy was also shocked and asked, "Why does Ningtsi also have such a powerful spiritual beast?" Currently, no one could accurately judge the strength of the wild boar under Ningtsi's feet. However, at the very least, its size was there. Even if it was just for show, it was still a great threat to ordinary Chunin and Genin. Suddenly, Itachi let out a soft cry of surprise. Jishue asked, "What's wrong? I seem to have seen this ninja pig before, but..." After recalling for a while, Itachi continued, "But I'm not sure if it is this one because it did not seem to be this big at that time." Hyojin chuckled and said, "To think that you can still remember." Itachi immediately reacted and said, "Senpai, could it really be that spiritual beast of yours?" In an instant, everyone present, including the indifferent Kakashi, looked at Hyojin. Red Bean even asked loudly, "Kuroto, is this ninja pig your spiritual beast? How come I've never heard you mention it?" On the sidelines of the open field, Tian, who was looking up, used her elbow to nudge Shaoli. "Shaoli, I'm not seeing things right. Ningji also has such a big spiritual beast?" The shock on Shaoli's face was no less than Tian's. He nodded blankly. "You're right, I saw it too. Ningtsi really has a wild boar the size of a small mountain." Shikamaru came back to his senses and grumbled in a low voice. "Tisuke, I'm so unlucky to be in the same batch as these monsters. Tooth hurriedly nodded and echoed. My family still wants me to fight for the top 3 spots in the same batch. How am I supposed to fight for the top 3 spots if I encounter this group of monsters? Very quickly, seeing this exaggerated scene, the spectating students began to make a ruckus. Everyone was either comparing the strength of the few spiritual beasts or guessing who among Naruto, Sasuke, and Ningxi would be the winner in this spar. Compared to the sidelines, the atmosphere in the field was even more strange. Naruto, Sasuke, and Ningxi, who were standing on 3 huge creatures respectively, were quietly sizing each other up. Their eyes darted back and forth, but no one spoke first. A spar between 3 people was completely different from a spar between just 2 people. Between the 2 targets in front of them, who to deal with first was an important factor that could directly affect the outcome of the spar. At this moment, Bunta the Toad, under Sasuke's feet, said angrily, "Brat, didn't I tell you before? If there's nothing important, don't casually communicate with me." Sasuke, who had already activated his Sharingan, said in a deep voice, "Brother Bunta, this is a battle for me to regain my honor. Please help me." Humph. After snorting heavily, Bunta glanced at the big wild boar under Ningxi's feet and then shifted his gaze to Exainia under Naruto's feet. His expression froze, and one of his hands subconsciously held the short katana at his waist. There was no doubt that Bunta recognized Exainia. Exainia, who was on the opposite side, stuck out his tongue and said with a smile, "So it's you, Toad." Obviously, at the same time that Wentai recognized Exainia, Exainia also recognized Wentai, who was also from the 3 Great Holy Lands. Although his tone was full of ridicule, his remaining "I was flickering with eagerness to fight." Naruto hurriedly asked, "Exainia, do you know that big toad opposite you?" Exainia responded, "Well, it's a troublesome guy." Naruto then pointed to the big wild boar under Ningxi's feet. "What about it? Do you know it?" It's just a stupid pig. I don't know how many of them I kill every year." With just a glance, Exainia snorted disdainfully. In his opinion, the only real opponent was Bunta. As for the wild boar, not to mention its messy hair, its body was also covered with old scars. At first glance, he knew that it wasn't doing well. Its eyes didn't have the cunning of a high-level ninja beast, and its intelligence was probably not high. Although it was not small and could scare people, most of it was just for show and could not withstand a single blow. Swish! Almost at the moment when Exainia snorted, it suddenly launched a surprise attack, and in the midst of the whistling sound, a tail hit fiercely towards the wild boar. Boom! Exainia's thick tail hit the wild boar, and in an instant, the wild boar was swept to the ground, making a loud rumbling sound. Sasuke on the opposite side was taken aback. He did not expect Exainia to be so cunning, and launched a surprise attack without warning. Bunta pulled out the short katana at his waist and shouted, "Sasuke, be careful." "Yes." Sasuke did not dare to be careless, and quickly activated the Sharingan in his eye sockets, ready to receive Exainia's surprise attack. Exainia also began to twist his body, looking for a good opportunity to attack. But at this moment, the wild boar that was swept to the ground by Exainia's tail stood up leisurely, as if nothing had happened, and snorted a few times. Its face showed a casual expression of "I can take this kind of beating all day long. This guy's not just for show." In an instant, Exainia and Bunta's pupils shrank, and their attention uncontrollably shifted to the wild boar. The wild boar spat out a gust of hot air from its nostrils. Then it shook the mane on its body. Under the last rays of the setting sun, it charged towards Exainia, who was coiled up and preparing to launch a surprise attack. Puff! Exainia immediately opened his mouth, shook his head, and spat out a mud-like substance towards the wild boar and Bunta. After feeling the thick natural energy contained in the mud that Exainia spat out, Bunta did not dare to take it head-on, and immediately jumped into the air and said, "Sasuke, use fire release ninjutsu." Sasuke understood and quickly formed a seal. Fire release. Great fireball technique. At the same time, Bunta, who was in the air, also cooperated with Sasuke's fire release and spat out a large amount of kerosene. Voila! The large amount of kerosene that fell from the sky was ignited by Sasuke's great fireball technique and instantly ignited a large area of flame. This flame was like a fire waterfall that sprinkled down from the sky, illuminating the entire sky, and at the same time, enveloped Exania and the wild boar on the ground. Exania saw that the situation was not good and immediately twisted his body to avoid the flames that fell from the sky. The wild boar did not dodge and let the mud that Exania spat out and the sea of fire that Bunta spat out to cover it. It just stomped its front hose heavily. In an instant, a huge wave of chakra spread out from the wild boar's body, enveloping a radius of a few hundred meters. Within the area that was enveloped, Bunta, who was in mid-air, suddenly felt his body sink, as if something was pulling him down and dragged him to the ground and into the fire. At the same time, Exania, who was about to move his body to escape the sea of fire, also seemed to have fallen into a sticky mud, and his originally swift and fierce speed suddenly slowed down, and the fire that was ignited by the kerosene poured down on him. Therefore, the three spiritual beasts were trapped in the sea of fire, and they were being roasted by the hot flames. Second update. Chapter 719. Inside the Naruto building. 3 generations Naruto, who was reading some documents, suddenly looked up and found that the dark night sky outside the window, for some reason, suddenly became bright, as if the sun had risen from the sky, making the sky red. Rumble. At this time, a burst of roaring sound came from the place where the flames were shining. Even the Naruto building under their feet was slightly shaking. 3 generations Naruto asked anxiously, "What's going on?" Whoosh, with a burst of wind sound, the Shadow Guard captain landed in front of 3 generations Naruto's desk, bowed and replied, "Naruto-sama, there seems to be a fierce battle outside the village. I have sent the Umbu to investigate." 3 generations immediately stood up and said, "Gather everyone. Let's go and take a look." Currently, the village is in troubled times. Not only the Danzo's defection has not been solved, but the Akatsuki organization has also begun to move, so 3 generations can't afford to be careless. At the same time, several Kages in the root base were also keenly aware of the inexplicable shaking. 3 generations Tsuchikage pressed his hand on the wall and said, "There is a battle not far away, and the movement is not small. It should be a large-scale ninjutsu." 4 generations Kazekage was puzzled. Was my attacked? Was it the Danzo or the Akatsuki organization? 4 generations Laying stood up and was about to go out. After the other Kage looked at each other, they also followed him. Whether the attacker is the Danzo or the Akatsuki organization, they must help Mai to resist the enemy. Because if Ivamai is captured, then the 5 great shinobi villages that ruled the world of shinobi will really become history. My village. Oh no! Looking at the sea of fire in the distance that almost reflected the entire night sky, Jiraiya exclaimed. Without waiting for Tsunade to answer, his figure flashed, and he pounced toward the battlefield. This group of brats is really courting death. Tsunade did not hesitate, and quickly followed Jiraiya. On the side of the Jonin, who was watching the battle. Not good. Kakashi, who had always been indifferent, also changed his expression at this moment. He instantly activated the Flying Lightning God technique. When the 3 children each summoned a giant spiritual beast, he faintly felt a sense of unease. However, he felt that with the Flying Thunder God art in his hands, he would be able to save them in time even if an accident were to happen. However, he did not expect that the spar would develop to such an intense degree as soon as it started. Swish! After flashing to the side of the battlefield, Kakashi instantly felt a wave of heat coming at him. He immediately raised his arms to protect himself, his expression incomparably ugly. Facing such a sea of fire, he did not know how to intervene at all. Jiraiya shouted, What are you all standing there for? Hurry up and stop them. Asma had a helpless look on his face. How are we supposed to stop them? The heat wave caused by the huge fire made it difficult for people to get close to it. Furthermore, this fire was not simply a fire release ninjutsu that was activated by chakra. Instead, it was a natural fire caused by the burning of kerosene. Therefore, it could last for a long time and was not something that ordinary water release ninjutsu could extinguish. In addition, the three giant spiritual beasts were still fighting fiercely in the fire. Even if Asma wanted to intervene, he was powerless. Jiraiya ignored Asma and directly shouted toward the battlefield. Bunta, stop fighting. Toad Bunta was currently using his short blade to block the fangs of the wild boar and kicking Exainia, who was pouncing on him. He did not have the time to care about Jiraiya at all. Jiraiya could also see that Toad Bunta no longer had the will to fight. However, Exainia and the wild boar were unwilling to stop, making it hard for him to stop. Tsunade supported her forehead with her hand. These little brats can't even control their spiritual beasts. She could see that although Toad Bunta had started a huge fire, he quickly realized that something was wrong and his will to fight had dissipated. At this moment, the one that was still fighting was Naruto's spiritual beast, Exainia. This huge snake from Ryuchi Cave seemed to be enjoying the battle. As for Ningxi's spiritual beast, the wild boar, it seemed to be fighting instinctively and was even more ruthless than Exainia. Fortunately, the spiritual beasts did not forget about their shamans. They split out a lot of chakra to protect the children, preventing Naruto, Sasuke, and Ningxi from being injured by the fire. Jiraiya said, "Jishui, let's attack together." In an instant, everyone looked at Jishui. In their eyes, the only person who could safely stop the three giant spiritual beasts from fighting was Uchiha Jishui, who had powerful illusion skills, and Susanoo. However, Jishui did not immediately agree to Jiraiya's suggestion as everyone had expected. Instead, he looked at Hyojin, who was watching the battlefield, and waited for Hyojin's instructions. First update. Chapter 722. Several of the branch family members who were gathered together looked over, only to see that the person standing not far away was none other than the elder of his own clan who had been humiliated by Hyojin during the clan meeting. Damn it! In an instant, several of the branch family members present cried out bitterly in their hearts. If it was in the past, they wouldn't have dared to discuss the Zone clan in public like this. But recently, the things that Hyojin had done were simply more fantastical than the previous, causing the branch family members to feel a sense of exaltation. Hence, they unconsciously started to discuss it. The ashen-faced elder of his own clan used a fierce gaze to sweep across the four branch family members in front of him. He continued to berate, "You bunch of idiots! How dare you criticize the Zone clan? Don't you know what kind of sin this is?" The few members of the Zone clan hurriedly lowered their heads and admitted their mistake. "I'm sorry, we misspoke. Pack. However, the elder of his own clan didn't calm down just because they lowered their heads and admitted their mistakes. Instead, he stepped forward and slapped the four of them. He used so much force that the crisp sound of the slaps echoed from the end of the street to the end of the street. The battle between the three giant spiritual beasts that had spread like wildfire in the village previously wasn't a bad thing for the Hyuga clan. After all, one of the parties involved in the battle was the Hyuga clan. That ridiculous battle that seemed to be caused by the children, in a way, could be considered to have displayed the strength of the Hyuga clan. However, the more the Zone clan thought about it, the more they felt that something was wrong. From their point of view, Hyojin clearly had such a powerful spiritual beast, yet he didn't inform the Zone clan in advance. Furthermore, he didn't choose the successor of his own clan, Hinata, but chose Ningxi instead. Even if this wasn't considered disobedience, it could at least be considered disrespect to the Zhong clan. The elder of the Zhong clan was already dissatisfied with Hyojin. Now that such a thing happened, he naturally had a stomach full of anger. Among the 4 branch family members who were slapped, 3 of them lowered their heads and admitted defeat. Only Kuroda Aoki, who was sitting in a wheelchair, had a gloomy expression on his face. Noticing that Kuroda Aoki didn't show the respect he should have shown, the anger of the Zhong family elder that had just subsided suddenly flared up again and scolded. "What? You sinner, are you still not convinced?" Kuroda Aoki took a deep breath, calmed his emotions, and bowed his head like everyone else. "I'm sorry." Oof. After a cold snort, the Zhong family elder continued to scold. "Back then, we didn't execute you and your damned brother Hyuga Awa together. It was already our Zhong family's special kindness to you.